Hey, good morning, Susie. Welcome from Minnesota. Oh, hey, good morning to Adam from London, England. Glad you could join, my friend. Glad you could join. Well, welcome to folks. We're going to be getting started in just a little bit. What I'm scrolling through here is one of the 12 sets of photos showing progress steps that I took Adam's machine and his carrying case through. If any of you remember when I did the unboxing of this all the way back in January of this year, it's been several months ago that I originally unboxed Adam's machine. You remember that I plugged the machine into the step up converter. When I wiggled the cord, the light was flickering, it was crackling, just all kinds of interesting things going on with this machine that was shipped all the way from London, England. So I had to deal with electrical issues, I had to deal with mechanical issues. And also, the case had separated on the inside and on the outside. So, what I was just doing right now is we're getting ready to start pretty soon is I was going through this set of photos where I show the restoration and repair of Adam's carrying case. It's a lovely, lovely carrying case, and it needed so much attention so that he can use it to carry his Swedish beauty around when it gets back to London, England. So you'll want to check these out, even if you don't do Facebook. You'll want to go to Facebook and look up the Cow Country Facebook page and check out these 12 sets of photos where I show all the different steps I took the machine and also the carrying case through. And there's Hank. Hank gets so bored when I'm down in the workshop. He doesn't know what to do with himself. So sometimes he just falls asleep on the couch. But the reason I'm sharing this with you is I will get contacted by customers all the time, and they'll say, "Where are things at with my project? Where is my machine in the order of other machines? How long will it be?" The thing that I discovered long time ago is whenever a project comes in, there's always unexpected things that will crop up. There's always unexpected things that will occur that will lengthen the duration of that project. And with Adams, it was a combination of electrical, mechanical, and then also the carrying case as well, that had literally come apart. And it was probably a combination of the original threads that held it together had rotted, but also just getting banged around on a journey of about 4,000 miles from London, England, all the way to Oconto, Wisconsin. So it takes a toll when the machines go through the shipping process for sure. So, anyway, check these photos out. There's 12 sets of photos. I want to say close to 300 to 400 pictures that I took of many of the steps that I took Adam's machine through, and also his carrying case. I got to show you the carrying case. I'm so proud of it. It turned out so lovely, and I think Adam will be really tickled pink with how the case turned out, along with what he sees his machine do today as well. So let me get some lights on, get some lights back on, and I'll just give you a quick little glimpse of Adam's case over here. Now, if any of you remember this case, when it arrived at the workshop, it was tattered and literally falling apart. And through some very, very careful restorative steps, I've been able to reattach all of the seams and segments of the carrying case that were coming apart. I also took the liberty, because the handle was originally the color, of this seam work on the side, and it was so faded and chalky, and no matter what I tried to do, I couldn't bring back the beauty of it, of that neutral color that this handle was. So I decided to pick out a very specific paint color, and I very carefully repainted the handle to match the body of the case instead of the original seam work on the outside. I think it pops, don't you? I think it pops, and it looks smashing, as my friends over in the UK might possibly say. It's quite a lovely case now. And then I had to also, as you'll see in the Facebook shots, there were also a number of seams coming apart on the inside as well. This was completely out of the case. There were a number of other seams on the inside as well that were separating. You could literally look from the inside of the case out, because the side seams had come completely loose. And now it's all tidied up, and the case will be a wonderful way for Adam to house and to carry his 1954 Husqvarna Viking. So, but this is my point in showing this is not to brag about my great skill in restoring this case, although I'm very pleased with the way it turned out. I even polished up the chromium areas of the case as well to brighten it up and give it a real pretty look. But beyond that, it's also just to reinforce again for all those that are still waiting. Trying to close this with one hand is like impossible. It's also to highlight for those that are waiting right now, that have a project pending, to say, if when your machine and perhaps your case come into the workshop, if there's something that we discover that needs to be done, I'm more than glad to do it, but realize that it could lengthen and impact the duration of what that project is. That's why when folks call and they really press my feet to the fire and they say, when will my machine be ready? Can you give me an estimate? I'm so hesitant to give estimates, because things like a case or electrical issues or other factors can come into play. And all of a sudden, a 10 to 12 hour project can become 20 hours. So, but at any rate, Adam, this is your case. I think it's spectacular now, and it'll be a wonderful way to carry your Swedish beauty in style and panache. Yeah. So, all right, who else do we have? Oh, thank you. Susie, I think, put a link. Thank you so much. Now, Adam started the top. Oh, lovely. Okay, good. Good. I'm glad you like the handle. I thought the handle color gave it a little bit more pop than it did originally. So let's get into this pretty quick. I'll move my phone out of the way. So again, this is a 1954. Let me change the camera angle a little bit. This is a 1954. A 1954 Husqvarna Viking. It is going to be rated, if you take the equivalent of its European specs, it's going to be rated at a 1.5 amp motor. Again, the difference, the trade-off, when you're talking about machines that are set up, the motors and the lights are set up to run on European type voltage, somewhere between 220 to 250. When you're talking about machines like that, the overall amperage is going to be lower. It's going to be lower. Hold on a second. I've got to close down my. So it's going to be rated lower. In other words, where normally a machine like this would have a displayed rating of it of say 1.5 amps, when you go to the European marketplace, it's going to be the equivalent of 0.7 to zero point 0.8 amps, but because of the higher voltage, you're going to get comparable power from the machine. In other words, with me running Adam's machine on this step up converter, taking it from 110, 125 volts up to 250, it's going to be running just as it would in Adam's flat. It's not going to be running any differently whatsoever. But whenever you look at the specs, you have to take that into account, that European machines are going to be lower in their rating of amperage, but because of that higher voltage that they're running at, it's going to push that power up to the same level as its US equivalent. So also show you some of these books that Adam sent along with his machine as well. Kind of fun, an original advertising piece that Viking would have put out to promote this Class 20 machine. A lot of the machines you see on this channel are going to be Class 21 machines. Those are the lighter colored, minty colored type machines. The Class 20s had a little bit of a darker green patina to them, which kind of sets them apart. But it's really a fun advertising piece that would have been put out back in the day when this machine was first introduced. And was, these very well would have been in Viking dealerships or other places where the machine would have been available for sale. And then also an original Class 20 owner's manual, operating manual as well. Adam sent this along just for fun. So when we did this live stream, I could show them to you. And then I'll, of course, be returning these to him when the machine is shipped back to London, England. But it's always great. It's always kind of exciting to have original pieces that you can follow the provenance of that machine and understand better about the origin of that machine and just what that culture would have been like at the time back in 1954 when this machine would have been presented, for sale. So, and I have one more thing. After the live stream today, I couldn't quite get to it. I was working on another machine. You can kind of see it across the way on the other workbench. It's a Singer 301A that I'm hoping to live stream tomorrow. So we're going to have almost back-to-back live streams. We're going to do the live stream today on Adam's machine from London, England. And then tomorrow we're going to be doing a live stream, I'm hoping, on this 301A that came from right next door in Minnesota. And that's kind of the exciting thing about the magic of the workshop, is people learn about it and they realize the difference, of bringing a machine or sending a machine here versus somewhere else in the world. I mean, think about the number of sewing vac or sewing repair places there are between London, England and Oconto, Wisconsin. And after Adam had done his due diligence, he was like, the choice is obvious. And the choice is really based on the way I do things, my process, and the process continuing to improve. So I'll be excited to present this one to you as well tomorrow, hopefully. That belongs to, oh gosh, I'm blanking out his name. Brad Bradley or something. Hold on a second. Let me see. Got it somewhere over here. Oh, I was way off. I was kind of way off. It's William Bradley's machine over there on the other workbench, the 301A. Okay, so what I was about to say, and I got sidetracked, is I have one more thing to do to Adam's machine. Everything else is complete, but I also need to, you may have seen some of the pictures on Facebook where I was taking off the old crusted, dried out rubber feet that are on the bottom of that 301A. The same thing is true of Adam's machine. The rubber feet on the bottom of this Husqvarna are completely dried out. They're flattened, they're compressed, they're degraded, they're in horrible condition. So I'm going to be replacing them with some non-skid type pads for the bottom of the machine, as I've done with other Husqvarnas, and give a nice, stable sewing surface to Adam. It's so critical. A lot of people would think that it's not a big deal if the feet on the bottom of a sewing machine, whether it's a Husqvarna or some other machine, they think it's probably not a big deal that they're all crusted up. You just set the machine down and there it is. But they really do create a very nice cushy surface for the machine to sit, and they reduce the vibration factor dramatically. So if your sewing machine, whether it's a featherweight or a Husqvarna or a FOF or whatever it is, if the rubber feet on the bottom of your machine are to a point where they're really not providing that stability and they're not reducing that vibration factor as you're sewing with the machine, even if you have it on a cushy surface, by all means look at solutions to get those replaced, because not only does it make it more cumbersome to try to sew with a machine if it's not stable and it's wiggling and it's vibrating and other things like that, it also sends a little bit of that reverberation back through the machine as well. So you don't want that to be the case. It's a disruptive, unnecessary thing. And there's a lot of solutions out there for replacing rubber feet, either adaptations like I've come up with for Husqvarnas, or there's other solutions out there, say for 301s and featherweights as well, that are now being manufactured aftermarket. Yeah. So this is, you can kind of catch a little glimpse of it next to Adam's manuals and his advertising piece. You catch a little bit of a glimpse of the sewing pieces that I have prepared for the live stream today. I've got a combination. Oops. If one of the moderators could jump in, unfortunately, it looks like our porno person has come back to visit us. So if one of you moderators that's present, Susie or Emma, or I didn't notice if one of the other moderators is here, if you could go after that last addition to the live chat there that starts with girls, and go ahead and block them, delete them, throw them into a timeout, take some sort of an affirmative action against them, I would appreciate that very much. So these are the sew-offs that we have prepared today that I'm looking to sew with. And I should also talk about the setup of Adam's machine as well. The setup on the Husqvarna today is, to start, the needle that I chose because I really wanted to hammer some leather. And I honestly don't know what kind of sewing Adam is planning on doing with this machine, but I've got it set up right now with a Schmetz 9014 universal leather needle. So it's a 9014 universal type leather needle. So it's going to be able to sew primarily leather, but I'm also going to be sewing other materials with it as well. So Adam and I can chat after the live stream if he's looking at doing more generalized sewing. He just needs to be aware right now there's a leather needle in the sewing machine. And when you set the needle on this Viking, you want to put the flat side of the needle to the back. When you set it, put the flat side of the needle to the back. And when it comes to setting up the bobbin case, you want to have the bobbin thread if you have the bobbin case, say, in your left hand. I'll kind of show you here. If you have the bobbin case in your left hand and you have the bobbin in your right hand, you're going to have the thread coming underneath, so that as the bobbin is turning in the bobbin case, it's going to be turning counterclockwise. Okay. And it's really important on any machine that you orientate the thread on the bobbin in the bobbin case correctly. So I really want to, just hammer that home. Make sure when you set up your bobbin case, assuming you're holding your bobbin case in your left hand, that the bobbin in your right hand has that thread coming underneath. So when you insert it and thread it through that tension band on the bobbin case, the bobbin, as it's feeding the thread for the machine, will be turning counterclockwise. Okay. And I should also point out, what I'm showing you in the camera right now is actually an aftermarket Husqvarna bobbin. Bobbins are they're one of those things that you can get good aftermarket versions of bobbins, and you can get some not so good bobbins as well. They don't generally aftermarket. They don't spend the time and give the attention to doing the bobbins to the original spec exactly. It might be really close, but it could be a thousandth of an inch off, which affects as that bobbin is spinning inside of the case. It can create a little wobble, or it can even cause that thread to misfeed. So just be real cautious if you're if you're wanting to get additional bobbins, always, if possible, try to go with originals that were made in the period of the machine. For this machine, it would be in the 1950s, 1954 exactly. But if you get aftermarket ones, you can always verify them with a caliper, a mechanical caliper, as you've seen me do before, and check the dimensions, check the span here, check the hole as well, because even the hole on how it slides onto that bobbin case can affect how this bobbin performs in the sewing process for the machine. So, be careful, because you can create a lot of frustration for yourself simply because you're getting an aftermarket bobbin, and it creates problems on how the machine uses it. So today during the live stream, we're going to be going through a little bit of a field of different sew-offs. Again, I don't go with one sew-off and consider it, one is done. We're going to be sewing protected full grain leather. We're going to be sewing heavy grade denim. We're also going to be sewing this real tricky Naugahyde. Naugahyde is a fake leather that would have been used way back in the day to cover chairs and other things like that, and offer a much more affordable option for covering upholstery type items versus using genuine leather, which would have pushed the price of things up dramatically. So we'll be doing a single layer of that. We'll be doing a double layer of that as well. We're also going to be sewing what I call this bubblegum material, which, like this Naugahyde, is going to have a high content of vinyl in it, which gives it a stretch factor and really can create a lot of havoc for an average sewing machine, causing it to distort stitches and also to skip stitches as well. And that's why I pour so much time into the machines, is to try to lower the likelihood of that happening. This again is protected full grain leather. Well, I think we'll be doing 2 layers of that, which is the equivalent of probably about 10 ounces of leather if you look at it from the side. Not an easy sew off at all. And again, the one thing that folks need to understand about the Swedish Beauties is they are a very powerful machine. Again, Adams, his European equivalent would be 1.5 amps. But at the same time, there are also a belt-driven machine. And whenever a machine is belt-driven, it gives an opportunity for that belt to become glazed and to slip and to cause launch and traction issues for that machine as well. So, some of the things that we do in the sewing process, like making sure that that take-up arm is at the highest position when we launch, can help lower those factors. But the reality is, a belt-driven machine is a belt-driven machine. That's one of the fun things that Singer did when they decided, after people going crazy over the featherweight, they decided to introduce the machine that I have on the other workbench, the 301 and the 301A, that do not have a belt on them. They're a direct drive positive traction type machine. That was Singer's solution to saying, you don't need to worry about a belt slipping. You don't have to worry about replacing a belt. We're going to set it up with, interlacing gears from the motor output pulley to the balance wheel. But that doesn't have to be a showstopper if you have a machine that's belt driven, whether it's like Adams' 1954 Husqvarna or any other belt driven machine, because regular maintenance on the machine and also setting it up for success when you're sewing can all but eliminate those factors. So anyway, back to what I was trying to show you here: protected full grain leather. And then I also have some saddle grade leather as well. This stuff right here. What else do I have? It looks like I've got some genuine elk hide as well. And if you could feel this with your hand, I always talk about, depending on where the leather is cut from the hide, we're going to be sewing through the equivalent of a belt. Actually, we're going to be sewing through the equivalent of a belt with the protected full grain leather, the saddle grade leather, and also the elk hide. Then I have some of this compressed felt, which is a heat treated type felt. It's not like the stuff you used when you were a kid back in school. It's very, very difficult to get through this stuff. It has a very high piercing threshold. And then finally, last but not least, we're going to be sewing on 100% cotton. So the reason I do this is I want to show the customer the capabilities of their machine, to really open their eyes to the possibilities of how they can potentially use that machine in different sewing applications. if I had a nickel for every time a customer watched a live stream of their machine and they watched me sew leather like this stuff, and they said, I had no idea. I've had that machine for 25 or 30 years, and I didn't think that that machine could handle leather. And all of a sudden they see a live stream of their machine sewing, all of this saddle grade leather or this elk hide or this protected full grain leather. And it opens their eyes to new possibilities as far as projects with their sewing machine. That's why I do that. It's what I call the sewing Olympics as we go through these wide field of sew offs. And it makes it more real, doesn't it? Because you'll be on some channels where they'll do a quick little sew off with a machine, and they generally don't even show the lock stitch. They just show the top stitch, and they consider one is done. One is done. That's not the way I work in the workshop. In the workshop, I want to make it as real as possible so that when the customer gets it back, they're incredibly excited about the possibilities of that machine. Okay, so with all of that excitement and all of that blah, blah, blahing, why don't we do some sew-offs on this machine finally? And the other thing I'm going to show you is we're not going to be sewing again as we would on any other machine that generally is on one of the two workbenches, sewing by just plugging the machine into a power strip. We're using what's called a step up and step down converter. You can see it right over here. And this step up and step down converter, what it does, if you're in the US, it will take our voltage of 110 to 125, and it will step it all the way up to between 220 to 250 volts. So we're going to be sewing at about 230 to 250 volts today using Adam's machine. Now, if you're in the European marketplace, and let's say someone purchases a machine from the workshop that's set up and wired for US voltage, they can also pick one of these up, and they can flip a little switch on the back. And what it'll do then is it will take that 220 to 250 volts, and it will step it all the way down to between 110 and 125. And this particular one, when you look at step up and step down converters, they all are going to be rated differently when it comes to the amount of watts that they can handle. The average sewing machine, whether it's a Husqvarna or whether it's a Singer or whether it's a Pfaff or a Bernina or an Elna or a Janome or a Juki or whatever it is, the average household sewing machine is going to require about 100 watts, 100 watts. And so what I did to kind of hedge my bets a little bit is when I was looking at a step up or step down converter, anticipating Adam's machine coming from London, England, I picked up one that actually is rated up to 200 watts. So I've actually got more than 2 times the wattage capability with this step up, step down converter in case I get a machine that's a little bit more demanding, maybe a light industrial from Europe or something like that, that's going to require a little bit more latitude as far as tolerance, as far as wattage. But they're very, very easy to use. And then they come with various adapters so that you can, if you have, say, a machine from France, the plug-in style might be a little bit different than Adams. I'll just show you Adams again if you haven't seen it before. It almost looks like a something like you would plug in to run your dryer, doesn't it? So there's different adapters that they send with this particular one as well. This particular one is put out by a company called Power Bright. You can kind of see it in the shot there, Power Bright, Power Bright, if you want to check it out. But it's so easy and so friendly to use. You just plug it in, and then as soon as you flip that switch, that machine now is going to be fed the equivalent of 220 to 250 volts. So we can power it up and run it just like we were running it in Adam's flat in London, England, which is, I think that's really cool. All right. Oh, I got to show you one other thing that's kind of interesting and fun. When you're talking about a machine that runs in the European marketplace, the bulbs are going to be very, very different than our bulbs. And if I kind of push this one and take it out, you can get a glimpse of it. I find it quite interesting. Maybe I'm just entertained easily, but it looks a lot different than an average incandescent type bulb like we might typically put in one of our sewing machines if we're not going to use an LED one. And then this one is rated to be able to operate, between 220 to 250 volts. We could easily put a US bulb in there that would fit in there just as easily with these little pin flanges that snap it into place. But as soon as we plugged that machine in and turned it on, running between 200 and 250 volts, we would blow that bulb out. This one is designed to be able to tolerate that higher voltage. So I just thought it was interesting. You put that back into place. Also, when you turn it on, it's kind of an interesting looking bulb too. I'll just show you. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it in the camera, but it almost looks like an olden style bulb sort of to me. So right now, surging through this bulb right now is between 220 to 250 volts. Kind of cool, huh? Again, maybe I'm entertained easily, but I think it's really cool. Okay, well, why don't we start with sewing? Let's see. Let me give you the choice. And actually, I'll give Adam the choice as well. I showed you kind of what I have prepared. So why don't some of you jump into the live chat if you're not already there, and type in what you'd like to see me try to sew first. Again, I've got protected full grain leather, single layer of that, 2 layers of that. I've got this Naga hide material. I've got some saddle grade leather. I've got some genuine elk hide. I've got more saddle grade leather. I think I was planning on using the slow gear possibly to sew this. And yes, even the class 20, that was actually the first in the Green Machine lines that offered more than a straight stitch. It has that slow gear feature on it as well. Also, it has the auto clutch disengagement also. And I've seen things posted on Facebook and other places that suggest that the class 20s don't have all the bells and whistles that the class 21s do, but they certainly do, including the jam-free raceway as well. And I've got some of this bubblegum material. I've got some of this genuine heavy-duty denim, this compressed felt, and then 100% cotton. And I've got a little stiffener in there as well, just to give it a little bit more stability. So what are y'all thinking? What would you like to see? I see Emma jumping in with saddle grade. Adam, if you have a preference, Adam, on what you'd like to see sewn, I always give preference to the owner first. I'll certainly sew what Emma wants to see in the saddle grade leather, but if you'd like to see, yeah, saddle grade is good. Okay, so we'll do the saddle grade first. We'll do saddle grade first, and then we'll jump into some of the other sew-offs. So again, I've got different saddle grade options set up. I've got 2 layers of saddle grade, which again is going to give us a thickness of probably about 8 ounces of leather. You can kind of look at it there in the shot. Definitely not a light sew-off. It's definitely not a light sew-off by any stretch of the imagination. And then I've got more saddle grade over here where I thought that I would maybe try using the slow gear and just show you the benefits of that slow gear and being able to navigate around corners a little bit more easily. So, all right, let's start with this and see how the machine does. Again, any machine, when you change through a wide field of materials, it might require some tension adjustments, but we'll see how she does. And I don't need to have that light on. I might shut that light off right now because I think it might impede our viewing it a little bit. So, okay. So saddle grade leather, I'll start with a single layer. Go ahead and buzz down it with a straight stitch. Again, this will be about 4 to 5 ounces of leather. And then we'll add the second layer of saddle grade leather to it. And what I'll do first of all is a straight stitch going down, and then we'll follow up laying down a zigzag next to it. Okay. And on these class 20s, when you're initially launching, it doesn't hurt to hold on to that thread a little bit. Otherwise, what the machine tends to do, because of the hook design, it tends to try to suck some of that thread in, and it creates that a little bit of a launching bird nest on the bottom. You can avoid that to a greater degree by just holding onto the thread on the initial launch, and then as soon as the machine starts sewing, you can let it go. I'd strongly recommend that, just because it's a design feature of the machine that it's gonna start to pull that thread as you begin to launch, and you can avoid the frustration of getting bird nesting by doing this. At least most of the time you can avoid it. All right, so a straight stitch going down, and then we'll try a zigzag down the same material. Here we go. It's always good to have your foot on the foot controller. Always good. Some lovely, lovely stitching. Let me get that drawn out here, and we'll take a look at those stitches. And I think I'll use my my stitch off holder just to make it a little bit easier for us to potentially see these. And the only thing I'm seeing is I'm seeing a really lovely top stitch and a lock stitch, but I might want to make a slight adjustment on that upper tension, just to make sure that we maintain good stitch visibility and definition as far as that top stitch. All right, let's take a look at these, see what we think. So this again is saddle grade leather. I'm going to kind of go down and across. I'm trying to pause to let the camera catch up a little bit. So all in all, I'm very pleased with the top stitch, but I think we could even make it a little bit better. If you look at the edge again, as far as the thickness, you can see straight away that it's not a lightweight type leather. It looks like Adam is going to be sewing military style jackets and probably sewing a number of different layers. And this machine is more than capable of handling that, but it might require some adjustments as far as tension to get a good stitch balance. Right now, we've got a decent looking top stitch, but it's a little bit underserved. So we could make it a little bit more poppy by just backing off this upper tension a little bit. And the upper tension on this class 20 Viking is one of those that doesn't have set stop boundaries. In other words, a lot of upper tensions you'll have, say, between 0 and say 10, where you'll turn it and then there's a stop point. On this one, you can turn it around and around and around and around and around and around. So it becomes a little bit more tricky sometimes in getting that sweet spot until you make some adjustments depending on the type of material and the thicknesses that you're sewing. So just be aware of that with this style upper tension, there's no stop boundary. It's not a limited range of 1 to 10. The control can be turned around and around and around and around, or the other way, counterclockwise, to reduce upper tension as well. If you're getting an imbalance in the top stitch and the lock stitch. So now let's have a look at that lock stitch. I'm going to flip this around and take a look at the lock stitch. A little bit harder to see because of the nap factor of the saddle grade leather. But I'm looking at this and seeing a very, very lovely lock stitch. Probably almost a little bit too lovely because, again, the top stitch, while it's good, it's a little bit underserved right now. But all in all, a very, very nice outcome for this machine. Now we're going to make it even more difficult for Adam's machine. We're going to go from a single layer of saddle grade leather all the way up to 2 layers. And I'm just going to give this little flippy edge here a little quick clip because it's going to kind of get in the way of what we're trying to do. So now we're going to be going from, which is certainly not an easy sew off, we're going to be going from about 4 or 5 ounces of saddle grade leather all the way up to between 8 to 10 ounces of saddle grade leather. You can see it there from the side right there. So what we're going to do first is try to lay down a straight stitch, and then we'll lay down a zigzag next to it. I'm just going to make a quick, just a subtle little adjustment here because we thought that our top stitch was a little bit underserved. I'm just going to very, very gently back this off just a little bit, not much, just a little tiny little bit. Because all in all, we've got a pretty good balance right now. So again, if you're brand new to sewing, or if no one's ever explained it before, what this upper tension unit does is it pulls up on the thread in the sewing process to help define the lock stitch, to help define this stitch on the bottom of the material. The bobbin case down below is going to be pulling down to help define that top stitch. So there's a constant tug of war. This unit is pulling up, that unit down here in the bobbin case, down here, is pulling down to define that top stitch. And if there's an imbalance, if one has more muscle than the other, significantly, it's going to throw that stitch balance off. So it's always that challenge of trying to find that sweet spot where they can work together as friends, they can pull up and down equally, and then you get a nice balanced stitch. All in all, I think we got a very, very nice stitch with this first stitch off on this saddle grade leather. Quite lovely, actually. But I think we can make it even better. As beautiful as that stitch is, we can always, 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 always make it better. That's one of the principles of the workshop. So now we're stepping it up to 2 layers of saddle grade leather. I'll see if I can sew relatively straight, and we'll do a straight stitch down first, and then we'll do a zigzag next to it. And if I didn't explain, which I don't think I did, Adams Class 20 from 1954 is a straight and zigzag Swedish Beauty only. It is not going to have cams that go into it. There's not an area in the back where you can insert those black cams that I've shown you in the Class 21s that will give you a choice of decorative ornamental stitches. This is a workhorse machine that lays down a lovely straight and a zigzag stitch. No cam generated stitches whatsoever, which, you know what, that can actually be an advantage because then you don't have to be concerned about dealing with some of the issues that come with the cam features like the tri-motion and cracked cam stacks and everything else. Okay, so all of that blah, blah, blah. Let's see if we can do a straight stitch now down these 2 layers of this saddle grade leather. And then we'll lay down, if I sew straight enough, we'll lay down a zigzag right next to it. Okay? Oh, good morning to Michelle as well. Good morning to Michelle. And I probably missed greeting some other folks as well. But I see that Michelle is joined as well. And I hope everything is going okay with your family, Michelle, with the hospice situation and everything for your, I believe it was for your dad, I believe. Any rate, I hope that's all going well. Okay, here goes a straight stitch, and I'll kind of be ready to give this a hand start. Possibly, it might need a hand start, just because we're going through so much leather. We'll see. Also, I'm going to hold on to this thread a little bit so I can try to avoid that bird nesting. All right, here we go. Well, I didn't do a stellar job of sewing straight, but I did better than usual. And you can see we got a beautiful, beautiful top stitch with just that very, very subtle adjustment that I made to that upper tension. Remember how I turned it a little bit to the left? I turned it a little bit counterclockwise because in looking at this first row where we went through one layer of saddle gray leather, I didn't think it was poppy enough. And now as you look at those two side by side, I think you can see right away what I meant by that. You may have looked at that first stitch row and said, I think that's pretty doggone good. Well, it is, but it's not as good as it could be. And now with that very simple little adjustment, look at what we did to that top stitch. All of a sudden, it cries out and it says, look at me, look at me. And that's exactly the type of stitching that Adam wants as he restores vintage military style jackets. He wants that stitching to cry out, look at me, look at me. But it just shows you how easy it is sometimes to make a very, very subtle adjustment to the machine and all of a sudden take a nice stitch and make it spectacular. Yeah, I think as you look at those two stitch lines, you can see right away that this one is okay, but this one is spectacular. And that's what we're always aiming for, is trying to get a spectacular stitch, aren't we? Now, the only thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is we certainly gave a more spectacular look to that top stitch with that adjustment we made. Did we hurt our lock stitch? Did we hurt our lock stitch? That's kind of what we're going to find out shortly. Because that's what can happen is if you make an adjustment, you can improve one side, but you can steal away from the other side. And again, we're only going to be seeing one stitch row. We're only going to be seeing one stitch row because we only sewed through the two layers once so far. We're going to be trying to do it one more time with a zigzag. And a zigzag is going to be even more challenging for Adam's machine because as soon as you incorporate needle swing, you raise the difficulty level of maintaining that stitch balance, that stitch integrity. You right away raise the difficulty level because as that needle is moving, it's moving the thread in the sewing process and it can really mess you up. All right, let's see how we did going down this stitch line. We'll first of all look at the top stitch and then we'll look at the lock stitch after that. All right, let me try to get this balanced on my knee, sort of, kind of. Waiting for the camera to cooperate here. Isn't that a dramatic difference? Isn't that a dramatic difference? When you look at that bottom stitch line that we did second after making an adjustment to the upper tension, we made a subtle adjustment to the upper tension. We backed it off just a little bit counterclockwise to reduce the pull of the upper tension unit to give more victory to the bobbin case. And look at what that tiny little adjustment did. It all of a sudden took that top stitch and it made it, wow, it just made it crazy, didn't it? It just made it absolutely crazy. And a quick thank you to the moderators. A quick thank you to Emma and to Susie and to Michelle. It looks like this porno person is resolute and determined to try to plague us today. So thank you, ladies, for dealing with that. Appreciate it. So all I can say is, wow, wow, we can make a huge difference when it comes to the stitch quality, sometimes with the most simple adjustments to the machine. And that's what we did in this instance. Let's turn it over now. And as I get ready to turn over, look at again at the thickness of what we sewed through with Adam's machine. I was prepared to give it a hand start, but I did not need to do that. And we just went through about 8 to 10 ounces of saddle grade leather. Yes, we have the advantage of a leather needle, but it really is, it's kudos to my process, and it's kudos to Adam's machine in getting the job done. So now we're looking at that single stitch row that we did. Again, my concern was, by making that adjustment to make that top stitch more poppy, did we take away from the lock stitch? The answer is absolutely not. It's an absolutely lovely lock stitch. And in fact, I think it even is better than the first one we did, because it's not overly emphasized. Overly emphasized meaning that when the upper tension is turned up too high, it actually shrinks the stitching on the bottom on the lock stitch. It condenses it, it compresses it, and it actually makes it look stubbier. So by backing it off a little bit, not only did we give victory to that top stitch, but we also have an even more lovely lock stitch in the process. So I'm very, very happy with this. Very, very happy. Let's go across and take a look at it. So it's so exciting when you can take there's a couple of things I'm excited about. One is, there are places you'll find on Facebook, and you'll find them on YouTube as well, where they say that a machine like Adam's, that was made originally for household use, is not capable of handling leather at this level. All evidence to the contrary. As long as you set up the machine for success, as long as it's been serviced properly, as long as it's been serviced properly, and it's ready to take on the awesome task of sewing saddle grade leather at this level, it can lay down all day long. It can lay down a beautiful, beautiful stitch, like the lock stitch you're seeing here, and also like that top stitch. Now, that top stitch we did on the second run is now on the top row. And both of them, in my opinion, are page 34 plus. Page 34 plus means it's near perfect. It's a spectacular, brag-worthy stitch that Adam's machine just did on these two layers of saddle grade leather. Absolutely gorgeous stitching, particularly that top row that we did after making that upper tension adjustment, and certainly the lock stitch on the bottom that we did following that adjustment to the upper tension. So if Adam is going to be sewing leather, doing his military jacket restoration work, boy, oh boy, is this Viking going to serve him well. It's definitely going to serve him well. So let's throw this to the back. And I didn't even show you guys, gals, I didn't even show you all of these. And again, this is my level of faith. This is my level of faith in Schmetz needles. But all of these sew-offs, including the one we just did with the saddle grade leather, all of these were done on the same needle we're using right now. Again, a size 90-14 Schmetz leather needle. I sewed all of this 100% cotton, this Naugahyde protected full grain leather multiple times, because protected full grain leather, if you didn't know it, it's coated with a special chemical to make it stain resistant, and to make it more durable. So right away, it raises that piercing threshold, and it also makes it very, very easy for that machine to have stitch integrity issues. But these are all the ones I tested that needle on before I got ready, as I was getting ready for this live stream today. The protected full grain leather, I did saddle grade leather, I did some of this compressed felt, and then all of these as well on this 100% cotton. You can see some of the challenges you can encounter right here on some of these stitch offs when you're trying to get that balance factor in line properly. And there were a number of changes and adjustments I had to make to Adam's upper tension unit to get it to be able to manage a wide field of materials. So it's not just a matter of plugging it in and it's all set. It really is a lot of thoughtful preparation when you're working with any sewing machine and you're trying to get it to this level. So I'm going to throw all these in the back. We already have the makings on this Schmetz needle. We already have the makings of a Sewing Olympics, a sew-off sandwich on this Schmetz needle. And certainly I'm going to replace this needle before I ship this machine back to Adam in London, England. So, oh, and this one as well. I didn't even have that in the sew-off stack. Beautiful stitching. So that goes in the back as well. We're getting quite a sew-off sandwich already, and we've just begun our journey. Okay, so now what I'm going to demonstrate, or I'm going to try to demonstrate, is I want to demonstrate the slow gear, which again, I've noticed that there are different posts on Facebook, and there are some posts, or there are some videos on YouTube that suggest that this earlier Viking, this Class 20, doesn't have some of the same features that the Class 21 does, which is not true at all. So let's get it set up to do slow sewing. Not very complicated at all. So we go to this side of the machine. Actually, I can see I've got to make a quick adjustment on this cord and get it underneath my little car here. Give me just a moment. There we go. I use my little vintage car as a way to kind of hold the wires back when we're especially going to be trying to use a bobbin winding function. So first of all, on this side over here is where we would wind a bobbin. Interestingly, on this Class 20, the only difference that I noticed is that normally there's a thread guide right here on the back of the pillar that you would come off of this spool right here, and then you would thread the thread through a thread guide, and then you would come down to this thread guide right here, and then you would come over to your bobbin. On this one, it goes straight from this spool pin. It goes from this spool pin straight down to this thread guide, and then directly over to the bobbin. So there's the only thing different about the Class 20s versus the Class 21s is they did not have a specific thread guide on the back of the pillar here. And you'll also notice if you were following this on the Facebook that one of these spool pins was actually missing. This one that I'm touching right here was actually missing on Adam's machine. So I found a suitable replacement from another Husqvarna, and then I had to do a little bit of drilling and soldering, and now Adam has two spool pins in case he wants to do twin needle sewing or just leave the machine threaded and then have a second spool of thread over here when he's winding bobbins. And these are just the things, again, you don't anticipate this initially when a machine is coming in and it adds time to the project. I'm happy to do it, but I'm saying that again to those customers that are waiting right now and saying, I thought you said that project was going to be 12 hours. Well, I didn't anticipate restoring the case. I didn't anticipate little things like this, and it adds time. So be patient, just as Adam has been patient as well with other machines that preceded his. So if we want to sew slow with this Class 20 Viking, all we have to do is unscrew this little retainer right here. You turn it towards the front, and then you pull it out like so. It's always easier when you're not on camera and you're not holding a camera. Hold on a second. There we go. You take it out, and this basically is going to now allow you to use that slow gear function. Okay. So let's try the slow gear doing a little bit more saddle grade leather. And you'll have to listen for this machine as far as it being stepped down now through a gear reduction, and what that means as far as being able to sew materials like this at a much slower rate of speed. Basically, the slow gear is going to take us from full speed all the way down to 1/5, all the way down to 1/5 speed. Welcome to Becky as well. I hadn't specifically noticed that Becky was here, but Becky is here as well. It's always great to have our family members present for things like this. Again, I see live streams as a celebration. It's an opportunity to celebrate a machine that was not working well, and now all of a sudden it is. So that's always fun, isn't it? Oh, you know what? I've got to rewind a little bit here. I just realized something. Please forgive me. I'm getting a little bit befuddled. I've got to wait on the slow gear thing because I said I was going to lay down a zigzag on these 2 layers of saddle grade leather, and I did not do that. I just looked back at there and I thought, hey, there's no zigzag on there. That's because I forgot to do it. Now, the other thing when you're sewing at heavier levels like this and thicker leathers and such is you want to adjust your presser foot pressure when it's appropriate. And you do that on this class 20 by opening the faceplate, and you can see a little disc right here, this little disc right here. And what that little disc does is it compresses this spring up here. And the more that spring is compressed, the more pressure down it's going to put on that presser foot and on that presser foot bar, which means it's going to press that material with greater force into the feed dogs and give it better feed and give it better traction. The more you rotate this to the front, the more it's going to push that spring up, the more it's going to increase that presser foot pressure. If you're sewing something much lighter and you don't want to have as much pressure, then you push this disc to the rear. It lets that tension come off of that spring, and it reduces the pressure down on the presser foot here. So that's another thing that I wanted to explain that I almost forgot, but I didn't. All right, so all of that blah, blah, blah. Now let's lay down a compressed zigzag on these 2 layers of saddle grade leather, which is what I planned to do originally. Better late than never, huh? Better late than never. And by a compressed zigzag, what I mean is I'm not going to be going to a full scale zigzag. I'm not going to be going to the max. I'm going to be setting my stitch length at right around 2.5, right about there. And I'm going to be setting my stitch width at 2.5 as well. Yeah, right around 2.5 in that general range. And since I'm pointing this direction, I might as well walk you around the machine real quick. This is to drop your feed dogs. When the feed dogs are fully engaged, that little dot is at the 12 o'clock position. If you want to do free motion quilting or freehand embroidery, you rotate this clockwise so that that dot is down at the 6 o'clock position. And then your feed dogs are fully dropped. And when you're done doing that free motion quilting or that freehand embroidery, you then rotate it back counterclockwise so that dot is back at the 12 o'clock position. And then you have those feed dogs fully engaged again. This is our stitch width, our stitch length. And if you want to sew in reverse, you move our stitch length all the way to the top. And this also has a screw-in factor so that you can try to lock that into place so that through the vibration of the machine, especially right now with Adam's machine having very, very poor footing, which I'm going to take care of before the machine is shipped, that vibration factor can sometimes cause a stitch length controller or a stitch width controller to move or migrate. So they give you this screw-in capability so it locks that stitch length in place. Just going to go a little bit shorter. There we go. And I'll screw that into position. And finally, we have our needle position control right over here. Most of the time, you would be sewing in the center position, but you certainly have the right to go left needle position or right needle position by just turning this. Always make sure if you're making any adjustments on any of these controls over here, that your needle is clear of the material, because that needle is going to move when we turn this, and you can bend your needle. See what happens? So always make sure you have your needle clear of the material if you're making any changes to any of these controls over here, with the exception, obviously, of the feed dog drop. That really doesn't matter. So let's do a compressed zigzag now through 2 layers of saddle grade leather. It'll be interesting to see how it does in maintaining that tension balance when we all of a sudden incorporate needle swing. Needle swing, again, can mess around with that tension balance a little bit on many sewing machines. I'm going to hold our thread again as we launch. Make sure our take-up arm is all the way up. And let's give this a go. Let's see how we can do in laying down a zigzag. I'm going to check my settings one more time. Okay, I think we're good to go. Let's give it a try. Here we go. And you may have heard a little click. I don't know if you heard that little click as I was launching into this stitch line. That was because I had gone over to the side and we initially took out that little retainer so we could go into the slow gear. I put it back in before we went into this sew off, so it re-engaged that gear ratio again to give us full speed. Yep. Okay, here we go. Oh yeah, lovely, lovely stitching. We've got a real good balance right now for managing this leather. We might have to make some adjustments as we migrate into some other materials. And again, we're going to be migrating into materials that are not leather specific. So that could throw a little bit of a challenge at us, because we're sewing with a leather needle. We're sewing with a leather needle at this point. But again, we've got a lovely, lovely compressed zigzag. Let me show that to you. We'll look at the top stitch first, and then we'll move over to the lock stitch after that. And then we'll finally move into the slow gear. Yeah. Okay, so this is our zigzag. Again, I call it a compressed zigzag because we're not at the full capacity of the zigzag. We're only probably about halfway there, a little bit more than halfway. Again, I'm blown away by what an impact we can bring so easily as you look at that lower row we did before we made that adjustment on the upper tension to give that straight stitch, top stitch, so much more pop. But I mean, it just goes to show you can overcome problems if you know what to do, right? All right, let's go across and look at these. I'm going to try to get the camera pointed right and get it nice and steady. Folks, that's a beautiful zigzag. Compressed or otherwise, it's a lovely, lovely zigzag. And it's possible, as Adam is restoring some of those vintage military jackets, that he might have a need for a zigzag stitch. A lot of his work might be straight stitching, but that zigzag just is spectacular on this saddle grade leather. Incredible. Let's turn it over and look at that lock stitch now for this zigzag. Again, a lock stitch is always going to be more challenging to generate because of that needle swing factor, especially when you're talking about this thickness of leather. This thickness of leather is no joke. 2 layers of saddle grade leather. Let's take a look at the zigzag lock stitch now. I'm distracted by how beautiful that straight stitch lock stitch is as well below it. Just spectacular, isn't it? Absolutely spectacular. All right. I'm doing my best to keep it steady. It really is challenging. And then I'm looking at the laptop at the same time to see if it's staying in focus, because I don't think that this, even though this is a uh, Razer Pro video cam, blah, 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 I don't think it was designed to get this close. It really is designed more for streaming from a distance. And I'm using it for an application where it has autofocus, and it sometimes takes that autofocus just a little bit of time to zero in on what I'm wanting to show. But right now, it seems to be doing a decent job, quite a nice job. Well, here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say I am so pleased, especially understanding now that Adam is going to be sewing. Very likely, he's going to be sewing with military vintage jacket restoration. He's going to be sewing leather. Look at how his machine is doing with this saddle gray leather. And again, saddle gray leather is not an easy peasy leather. It's used for gun holsters, it's used for jackets, it's used for belts, it's used for all kinds of hardcore applications. Even within the horse arena, they use saddle grade for a number of horse implements that they're using with showing horses and such. Whoops, I'm pointing at the wrong area. I was looking away from the laptop. Sorry. And there is a spectacular example of a gorgeous zigzag and a gorgeous straight stitch as well. Again, through 2 layers of saddle grade leather. That's our lock stitch. Unbelievable, unbelievable. And then our top stitch as well. Again, I love the impact. I love, 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 love the impact that we brought through that subtle upper tension adjustment, taking what I would consider an average mediocre type stitch on the bottom and then giving it a page 34 plus appearance with just a simple little adjustment, just a little adjustment to this upper tension unit. And we were able to take a stitch that was in the realm of mediocrity and make it majestic. Just amazing. Amazing. Adam, I love your machine. It's amazing. Plus, the cool thing is we're running at 250 volts right now. I mean, not right now, but and any of you that joined the live stream late, look at Adam's cool light designed to support 220 to 250 volts. It's absolutely bonkers what a cool light it is. It's off right now. You're not losing your mind. It's off. Don't think, oh my gosh, it's so dim. No, it's not. Ha ha. Yeah, baby. Yeah. Ha ha. So, anyway, let's move on and do some other sewing. I think we're going to do slow sewing now. And I'm going to move this to the rear again now that I finally remembered. I'm going to move this to the rear again now that I finally remember we had to do that zigzag on this saddle grade leather. Yeah, took me a little while, but I got it. I got it. All right. Jiminy Crickets, look at that sew-off pile. That is a big sew-off pile we're starting to get, y'all. A big sew-off pile. Okay, now we're going to go back and we're going to take this out again so we can try to do some slow sewing. Now, the one thing let's see, go and take that out, see if it comes out more easily this time. There we go. Yay. Okay, let me give this a go. We'll get this on here. We'll try to do a little bit of slow sewing now. I think for sake of time, because we've been running about an hour and 16 minutes already, And if you do the time difference, I think Adam told me it's about 6 hours difference between London, England, and the US, where I am. So as you go across the US, it even messes around more with the factor of the time difference between London and different parts in the US. But I think we're about 6 hours difference, if I remember what Adam told me. So we are going to now see if we can put this slow gear to work and demonstrate the benefits of that. Again, the slow gear does not change the power of the machine. It simply gives us more control. It takes us from full speed, where we really have to try to manage control of the needle speed using using our foot controller, and this gives us the capacity to slow it down significantly by just adjusting the gear ratio on the machine through the slow gear. I'm doing something at the same time, so I got distracted for a second there. Okay, just about there. All right. All right, let's give this a go, see what we think. I'm going to go ahead and hold those threads again on the launch so that we don't have any bird nesting. Get that back into position. Yeah. And I'm going to do my best. All of you know I don't usually sew very straight, but I'm going to try to sew around this tiny little piece of saddle grade leather just to demonstrate as best as I'm able to demonstrate the huge benefits of having this slow gear that the Swedish people came up with, even going all the way back to the class 20 machines that started in the 1940s and then were carried through to around the mid 1950s. All right, here we go. Almost there. All right, here we go again. Try to turn that again. All right, I'm going to stop right about there. But the slow gear is a wonderful feature that Husqvarna offers through their machines so that you're able to really gain a lot of control in the sewing process, especially as you're making tighter turns and corners in that. It's going to give you a lot more control and capacity to manage that outcome. And here again, I'll talk about as we go to different pieces of leather. You might have one piece of leather that's taken from one part of the hide. You have another piece of leather that's taken from another part of the hide, and that thickness and also the toughness of that leather is going to vary from one part of the animal skin to another. So here we have where we have a nice looking top stitch, but because this is from a different part of the hide, it's a little bit thicker, it's a little bit more dense. If we were going to sew a bunch of this type of leather, we might just make a quick little adjustment again with that upper tension to give ourselves just a little bit more pop on the top stitch. But all in all, a beautiful, beautiful top stitch. Beautiful top stitch. And again, probably about 3 to 4 ounces of leather is what we're looking at. We'll turn it over, look at that lock stitch. Again, the lock stitch is always going to be a little bit more of a challenge to do because of that, the factor that the needle has to pass through the leather and then pull that thread back up through that thick leather. But we have a beautiful lock stitch as well if you look at that in the shot. Beautiful lock stitch. The stitch definition, the clarity of the stitch is exactly as we want to be seeing. We've got a very, very nice balance right now between that top stitch and also this lock stitch sewing this saddle gray leather. So I couldn't be any more pleased. I'll throw this to the back as well. We'll add that to our sew off pile back over there. And we'll move on to our next sew off now. See what we're going to try next. All right. So these are the choices that we have. I'm just going to show you again as far as what we have available. We've got protected full grain leather. I think we already stitched some of that. I think I stitched some of that off camera. We've got protected full grain leather, a lot of that. We've got this Naga hide, which is a fake leather. We've got this very scary genuine elk hide, and it looks like on this end of the hide that it was cut from is literally the thickness of a belt. It's literally the thickness of a belt if you look at that from the side. So this stuff is going to be a significant challenge to this or any other machine. Then we have this bubblegum material. And if you wonder, why does he call it a bubblegum material? Look at this stuff. It's got a lot of vinyl in it. It almost is made to look like leather, but it really is a vinyl material. And I always like to sew this because it really does demonstrate how well the machine is running, because vinyl inherently will distort stitching. It will also cause skip stitching as well. So when you can sew a couple layers of this stuff and get beautiful page 34 stitching, it's saying a lot about how that machine is performing. Then we've got some heavy grade denim, some compressed felt, and then last but certainly not least, we've got some of this 100% cotton that I've added a little bit of a stiffener to. So what do you guys think? What do you want to see next? What would you like to see next out of those materials that we have? And if Adam wants to chime in, that's totally cool. I love to get the owners to chime in, and they have something they want to see specifically. Right now, I'm going to grab some water because my whistle is dry. What do you guys think? What are we going to see? Maybe see some denim. Susie is saying denim. And Adam is saying denim as well. So let's do some denim then. Let's do some denim. Again, I always talk about, less than an ideal setup. Most people that sew denim, especially if they're going to be doing multiple layers of it, they're not going to be sewing generally using a leather needle. But I do, because it pushes the machine even harder to perform when we give it a task like this of saying, I want to sew 4 to 6 layers of denim. And by the way, we're going to use a leather needle. So let's give it a try and see how the machine does. The big factor will be, how does it do in maintaining stitch tension and balance going through a material using a leather needle versus using a needle that would be more appropriate to denim. So we'll see. Now, we're looking at the denim right now. We've got 2 layers. We could fold it like this and give us a total of 4 layers. That's not an easy peasy thing, especially when we're sewing with a leather needle. We're not using the ideal needle setup for this machine. Or we could try folding it like this, get us up to 4 layers, and then fold it again and get us all the way up to 6 layers. Let's get some voting in the live chat, including Adam, the owner. Should we do 4 or should we do 6? Or am I totally crazy and maybe we should just do 2? I think 2 would be kind of silly, but should we do 4 or should we do 6? What do you think? Emma's saying 6. The owner, Adam, wants to see 6. Yeah. Oh, you're welcome, Susie. You're welcome. Yeah, needles do play into the equation of the type of project that you're looking to sew. And of course, they have universal needles. But remember that a needle like one of these, a needle is actually comprised of, depending on where you read and what you believe, as many as 10 parts comprise a needle. Everything from the point to the eye of the needle, where the eye of the needle is placed, the size of the eye of the needle, the scarf, the size of the scarf, the shaft, and everything else, the butt of the needle and everything else is going to impact how that needle performs as it's passing through materials. Not to mention the type of edge that point has as well. A leather needle is going to have almost like a razor edge to cut through the leather. A universal needle is going to have something similar, but not quite. So yeah, the needle selection weighs into the equation of the project that you're taking on to set you up for the greatest success, for sure. And then certainly the thread plays into that also. So I always say it when I'm presenting a machine like this, the owner is the boss. And a number of you have chimed in support of what Adam wants to see. So we're going to do 6 layers of heavy grade denim. I'm going to fold it in the middle like this, get us up to 4. I'm going to fold it one more time and get us all the way up to 6 layers. So let's get that underneath the presser foot, and we'll see how this machine does in stitching this much denim going down. I'm almost thinking I should probably consider putting some clips on here to try to keep this even, at least reasonably even. And the feed dogs on these class 20s are serious feed dogs. So when I'm sliding in underneath there, the feed dogs are kind of getting in the way a little bit of what I'm trying to do. So I had to kind of wiggle it into place. Okay, so again, 6 layers of denim. I think I will clip it in a couple of places. Put a clip over here. And I think we'll put a clip a little bit further down. Give me a little bit more of a chance of going semi-straight. And I think what we'll do is we'll try laying down a straight stitch on it first. And then we're going to see if we can launch into a zigzag. Again, realize we do not have the ideal setup. We're using a leather needle on denim, and we're going through multiple layers of denim. So when we do that first stitch line, it might be like that saddle grade leather, where we might have to make some tension adjustments to get what we want. But let's give it a try and see how it does. And then I'll see if I can lay down a zigzag next to it. All right, let me get that take-up arm all the way up. Again, if you're brand new to sewing, you always want to launch with your take-up arm. You want to launch with your take-up arm at the highest position whenever possible, and it's just beginning to do that downstroke. See how as I'm wiggling the balance wheel, it's just starting to do that downstroke, which means all of the mechanics are freed up to be able to give you the maximum power and punch through, especially when you're sewing at this level. 6 layers of denim is not an easy peasy task. So let me give that thread a little hold as we launch so that we don't get bird nesting, hopefully on the bottom. And then we'll lay down a zigzag next to this as well. I'm almost inclined to move it over a little bit more. Give me just a second. I just don't want to encroach my space there. And I'm not going to change the presser foot pressure. I'm going to leave it just as it is. I probably should bump it up a little bit, but we'll leave it just like it is for right now. All right, here we go. Keep your fingers crossed. I kind of went crazy on the foot controller there a little bit. Sorry about that. And that was without a hand start, by the way. I was prepared. If we needed a hand start, I could give a hand start, but the machine did not even need it. Again, the European equivalent, we're looking at a machine that's running at right around 1.5 amps. So it's got a lot of kick, a lot of kick. All right, let's take a look at this. This will be our top stitch, and then we'll take a look at our lock stitch after that. And then we'll see if we can lay down a zigzag next to it. I better take those off. Yeah, we'll put it like that so we can see it a little bit easier, hopefully. Okay, and again, I did not adjust the presser foot pressure, so I'm seeing that the stitch size is a little bit smaller than it normally would be at the setting that I have the machine on, and that's a product of feed. When you have inadequate presser foot pressure, it results in the stitches being a little bit more stubby. They can be page 34 plus stitches, which is what I'm seeing here, but they will be a little stubbier. They'll be a little bit more compressed, a little bit smaller, because we're dealing with so many layers of denim. We're sewing with a leather needle, and if we don't have adequate presser foot pressure, it's not going to feed that material as evenly as it should to give us the full robust stitches that we otherwise could have with much thinner material. Okay, I'll finally get the camera pointed at the stitches. Finally. Folks, I'm going to pause right there and just say those are gorgeous stitches. Again, a little bit on the compressed size because of the presser foot pressure not being quite as high as it probably should be for managing 6 layers of heavy grade denim, but beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stitching. Lovely stitching. Kind of go across. I'm trying to hold my breath right now so I don't wiggle the camera as much. Totality of the stitching, as I love to say, kind of coming out on that. Folks, I didn't know what you're seeing, but I'm seeing some gorgeous, gorgeous page 34, if not page 34 plus stitching. Some really lovely, lovely stitching. And again, recognizing that it would be even better if we were using a needle that was appropriate to denim instead of a leather needle. But I'm very, very pleased with the results that we got for that top stitch. Now let's take a look at the lock stitch, and then we'll jump back into this and try a zigzag down it. Okay? This is our lock stitch now. Again, the lock stitch is always going to be more challenging for the machine because it's got to pull that thread back up through these layers of heavy grade denim. And if you notice, if you look at these stitches with a lot of scrutiny, you'll notice occasionally you'll see a stitch that has just a real subtle tilt to it. It almost looks like it's tilted a little bit, either, on the right side where it's kind of pitched up just a tiny little bit. It's hardly noticeable, but that is a tension factor. That is telling us that if we were going to be sewing 6 layers of denim all day long using a leather sewing needle, I'll say that again. If we are going to be sewing 6 layers of denim all day long with a leather sewing needle, we would want to bump up. Remember, we backed this off a couple of times to give ourselves a more pronounced top stitch. Now that we've migrated to a totally different material, we've gone from leather and now we've gone to denim. We've gone from leather to denim. Now we might have to adjust this back so that we can get a little bit more of a pronounced lock stitch. So what I'm going to do, especially since we're going to be doing a zigzag next, which is going to stress that lock stitch even more as we're stretching the span of that thread with that needle swing. I'm going to turn this just slightly back clockwise to give us a little bit more pull up, to give us a little bit better defined lock stitch, and also to pull that stitch thread a little bit more taut so that it doesn't have that real subtle tilt on the right side of the stitch line as you look at some of those stitches. I'll move across one more time and then we'll lay down that zigzag stitch. And again, the tilt of the stitch is hardly noticeable, but I'm looking at it with a great deal of scrutiny, and I'm saying we can make it better. We can make it better. Totality of the stitching, look at that as well. All in all, a very good looking lock stitch, but again, we can make it better, and we just did by just making a very subtle adjustment to that upper tension, so that when we do our next stitch line, it's going to be pulling up a little bit harder to define that lock stitch even more clearly and to pull that thread a little bit more tight, especially as we look at doing our next stitch line down here with needle swing incorporating a zigzag stitch. All right, so let's do that next. Let's do a zigzag down this material next. Try to get that underneath the presser foot again. And there is very good clearance under the presser foot for these Vikings, for the class 20 Vikings. But again, 6 layers of denim, that we're talking a pretty thick. I don't know if I even showed that to you. That's our thickness that we're sewing through. So it's not an easy peasy sew off at all. I had to check my direction there to make sure I was getting it lined up correctly again. With the top stitch facing up. There we go. All right, so now we're going to do another compressed zigzag right around 2.5 by 2.5. And we'll see how this machine manages this. 6 layers of denim. Again, sewing with a leather needle. All right, here we go. And again, you can't see me doing it off camera, but whenever you're drawing that thread out, don't be afraid to just rock that balance wheel just slightly in order to get that thread to release a little bit more evenly, a little bit more freely. Okay, I'll get my orientation right here. That should be, it should be our top stitch, unless I'm totally turned around. That should be our top stitch. This should be our lock stitch. Yeah, because that larger flap was on the bottom of the material. And again, when you're on camera, your mind is kind of racing, doing different things. So it's sometimes easy to get turned around and flip it the wrong way. So I'm trying to be extra cautious. All right, so let's get that into place and take a look at this zigzag, the top stitch first, and then we'll look at the lock stitch second. And for what I caught a little glimpse of it before you did, I'm really happy with what I'm seeing. I think that little adjustment that we made was the right one to do. I think the adjustment we made was the right one to do to give a little bit more authority to that lock stitch. We'll see when we flip it over. So here we're looking at the original straight stitch line we did, then the zigzag after that. Let's go ahead and go across and look at this zigzag top stitch. And again, this is a compressed zigzag. It's not a full-size zigzag. I'm doing my best to keep the camera steady. It's a little bit challenging. I've got my knee kind of lifted up, so hopefully it doesn't wiggle. All right, I'm going to come out a little bit because my leg is starting to jiggle a little bit. The totality of the stitching, I'm very, very pleased with what I'm seeing. Again, we're showing denim, 6 layers of it, probably the equivalent of around 12 ounces thickness. And we're getting some beautiful, beautiful stitching, both with the straight stitch and then also with the zigzag on the bottom as well. Lovely, lovely stitching. Again, not a light sew off. Look at the thickness of that. Now I'm going to flip it over. We'll look at that straight stitching and zigzag on the back of the material, that lock stitch. And we'll see if that, again, the zigzag with that needle movement it's gonna depend on that upper tension even more than the straight stitch because of that needle movement. So we'll see if hopefully we turn that upper tension far enough to give enough pull up for that lock stitch to keep those stitches nicely formed and presenting well. So let's go across and take a look. Yeah, all in all, I'm very, very pleased with what I'm seeing. But I think we could have even, if we were going to be sewing 6 layers of denim all day long using a leather needle, I think we would have to go up even a little bit higher, just a little bit higher on that upper tension to tighten this up and to give it even more pop, to give it even more pop. All right, totality of the stitching. Go right about to there. There we go. So all in all, I would say we did an excellent job of making that little adjustment. We would go a little bit further. We would go a little bit further with increasing that upper tension even more to give this stitch line, especially the zigzag stitch line, more pop and panache to give us even more clarity of that stitching to tighten it up even more evenly across there. But all in all, I would give it a definite page 34. We could make it better, but I think it's quite excellent considering the number of layers of denim and to consider the fact that we're using a leather needle, which is not nearly as compatible with denim as a denim style needle. So, yeah, excellent, excellent stitching. Let me throw this to the back as well. 6 layers of denim. We'll throw that to our little pile in the back. Which, by the way, if you join the live stream late, we're getting quite a pile back here. See if I can grab it as best as I can. So far in the needle that we're using, which is a Schmetz leather size 9014, this is the stitching that we've done on this needle already. You can readily tell why I love Schmetz needles. They just go and go and go. They're like the Energizer needle. They're like the Energizer needle. And a number of these I did off camera, but many of them as well we just did on this live stream. So let me throw these back to the rear again, and we'll move on to our next stitch off. And again, I want to watch our time a little bit. Looks like we've been running about an hour and 45 minutes. I was planning on keeping this to right around 2 hours, so something like that. We go a little bit longer, it's okay, but I want to be sensitive to your time as well. So here's what we have left in sew-offs. Actually, I'm going to throw this one to the side because we've already done this. We've got the compressed felt. We've got 100% cotton with a stiffener. We've got bubblegum material. We've got protected full grain leather. I've got a lot of protected full grain leather. I'm not sure what I was thinking, but I've got a ton of this stuff that we could potentially try. We've got this Naga hide, which is this fake leather. It's got a lot of vinyl in it. It's real tricky stuff to sew. And then last but certainly not least, we have this genuine elk hide. And again, this elk hide was cut from a section of the hide where it is the thick of thick. It's very, very thick stuff, just about like a belt. Susie is saying, let's do the cotton. What do you think, Adam? Does Adam want to see something other than the cotton, or should I give the cotton a go? And I don't see Adam chiming in. So I'm just going to go ahead and move forward with doing the cotton next. Okay, and Adam is saying the elk hide would be real helpful. So let's do this. If it's okay with you, Susie, let's go ahead and do the elk hide first, and then we'll do the 100% cotton second. And then we'll probably, again, Adam is going to be doing a lot of leather type sewing. So that's where his interest in the protected full grain leather, in the saddle grade leather, in the elk hide as well. And again, that is some serious elk hide right there. This is going to really challenge this machine considerably. And this might require a hand start. We'll see. Because again, realize with this being a belt-driven machine, we don't have the positive traction. We have the short belt coming off of the motor running over the pulley system. Then we have the long belt running off of the pulley system and going up to the balance wheel. And then that power exchange has to go all the way down to the needle bar. So there's a lot of opportunity for drag, a lot of opportunity for slippage, especially when you're going at this level. But we'll give it a go. We'll give it a go and see how Adam's machine manages it. I also have to adjust us back to a straight stitch first. There we go. I got us back to a straight stitch again. We'll try a straight stitch, and then we'll try, I'm adventurous. Maybe we'll try a zigzag on this since we are dealing with a leather needle. We'll see how we do. And again, we're migrating to another type of leather again. We've already sewn saddle grade. We haven't done protected full grain yet, at least on camera. So now we're moving to a different type of leather again. The grain, the grit of it is going to be different. We'll see how the stitch balance is maintained with our current settings. We may have to make some adjustments again. So we'll see. All right, so saddle grade leather, probably about 5 ounces, close to 5 ounces of saddle grade leather. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate. Look at where my take-up arm is right now. Take-up arm is right in the mid-range. That would be a horrible place to launch for this saddle grade, or for this this genuine elk hide. So I'm going to move it all the way up, 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 up. Up, 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 up. A little bit further. Now it's on that downstroke. That'll give us the greatest opportunity for success. All right. I wish you could be in the workshop and see. I've got this camera like right up against my wrist that I'm holding these threads in the rear just to make sure we don't get any bird nesting. And then I'm prepared to give it a hand assist if we have to. So yeah, it's pretty entertaining, pretty exciting. All right, let's try this straight stitch to begin with. We'll see how our tension is maintained, and then we'll move over to a zigzag after that if we are feeling really, really adventurous. All right, here we go. See how it hit that leather and it just stopped? It hasn't given up, and I'm not going to give it a hand start. I'm going to hold on to this thread back over here, and we're going to muscle through it without a hand start. Let's see if we can do it. Yeah. All in all, I'm very pleased. Again, as you migrate from one leather to another and other materials, some upper tension adjustments might have to be made. This is a very, very dense leather. This genuine elk hide, very, very dense leather. And again, I did not make a change to our presser foot pressure. So if I bump that presser foot pressure up, which I'll do right now before we do our zigzag, let me open this up. Let's just bump this up a little bit so we can tackle a zigzag on this genuine elk hide next. So I'm going to rotate this disc towards me like this. And again, it's putting more pressure on that spring. You can even look at that spring and see that it looks different now, which means we just bumped up our presser foot pressure. If you lower your presser foot down and you raise it up and down just a little bit like this, you can feel right away the greater resistance pushing down against those feed dogs. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up. We'll give that a go, and we'll see what we think of that. But first of all, you know what? We'll look at all the stitching together. Let's just jump right into the zigzag. Let's just jump right into the zigzag. And then we'll look at both stitches side by side. The only thing I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to hedge our bets because we're dealing with elk hide now. And I've caught a little glimpse of the lock stitching, which looks really good. Matter of fact, let me look at it one more time real carefully. And that's kind of what you want to do when you do a stitch line using a new type of material, depending on your setup, your type of needle and your thread. You always want to take a quick little glimpse at the stitching top and bottom and just see what you're seeing. I'm seeing generally a very, very nice looking lock stitch. Kind of just show you from the side a little bit. That's our lock stitching on the back of the elk hide. But again, now we're going to be going into a zigzag stitch, which is going to incorporate needle swing. So I'm a little bit nervous about that. So I might just give us a little bit of an edge. I'll bump this up just slightly. And if you look at the Facebook shots, you'll see that there is a crack. There's a crack in Adam's upper tension housing on the outside here, this plastic piece. I did very, very carefully fill that in so that it's bonded and it's strengthened and it's secured. But if you caught that in any of the other shots as we were looking at this, your eyes weren't messing with you. That is a crack that was kind of gaping open. And if you have something like that, in lieu of replacing it, let me see if I can get a better shot of it. Almost got it. Finally. So in lieu of replacing it, you can very carefully, and I used dental tools, if you looked at on the Facebook shots, to fill that crack in, basically impregnate that space and plug it full of some very strong epoxy glue, and then wiped it clean so that this is not going to crack any further. Keep it nice and secure for Adam. And yes, that took time, which I always say projects can run longer than you expect them to run as you discover new things about the machine. So there you go. Okay. Wait for that camera to zero in. Now I'm going to adjust our controls over here. And again, what I'm doing over here real quick is I'm moving us to a compressed zigzag right around 2.5, moving our stitch length up to right around 2.5, right in that range. So whereas we could go to 4 and 4, we're going right around 2.5, 2.5 between these two controls to lay down this zigzag. And that's generally because as you stretch that thread more and more, In other words, as you increase those numbers from like 2.5 to 3, 3.5, and 4, you're going to have to make even more adjustments, especially with a real dense, thick leather like this, to maintain a proper stitch tension balance between the top and bottom. So for sake of time, I'm kind of bringing that zigzag down to more manageable size so we don't have to mess around with the tensions quite as much. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so here goes our zigzag, our compressed zigzag as it is, and we'll see what happens when we hit that leather again. Again, when we hit it the first time, it kind of, boom, it kind of stopped a little bit, and maybe I'll hit it with a little bit more force this time so we can pierce it more easily. Again, I'm not giving it full gas. I'm not giving it full gas. All right, here we go. Let's see what happens. No hand start. No hand start. I was ready. I was ready if we needed it, but no hand start for that at all. And I'm really glad. I just, real quick, as I was getting ready to launch this sew off, I made just a real soft bump up on that upper tension to pad our deck and trying to maintain greater clarity on that lock stitch on the bottom, again, because it has to pull that thread all the way back through this thick layer of genuine elk hide. And I'm glad I did, because it looks like it really, really did a good job of giving us even better clarity of stitch, even better clarity of stitch. Okay, unless I'm turned around, this is our top stitch. Let's look at that first. And again, the straight stitch is what we did first. It's interesting, at one point we kind of had to sew through, again, an imperfection in the leather, had to sew through a little dimple right there. You can kind of see that darker spot, and it kind of drew the stitching down as that needle moved over that uneven piece of the leather, but it managed it really, really well. All right, let's take a look at these and see what we think. I'm seeing a beautiful, beautiful zigzag. We'll see what you think. This little dimple right here just is a hoot to me. Right there, that little dimple. It's almost like a hole in the leather, and the stitching went right over the top of it. And I'm going to raise the camera up a little bit so you can look down at the thickness of that edge. I'll also tilt the leather towards you a little bit. Look at what we just went through. No hand start. No hand start. Just the sheer grit and power of this machine that's been restored in the workshop. That is serious, serious leather, folks. Serious leather. And Adam's machine, in my opinion, just did a spectacular job of laying down a beautiful straight stitch and a zigzag as well through this very, very thick, tough, nasty, but beautiful elk hide. Beautiful elk hide. And again, we can change the look of either one of these stitches. We could change the look of them by adjusting that stitch length or stitch width. What I elected to do was do a 2.5 by 2.5 zigzag. We could have done a 3 by 3. We might have to, again, as you increase the width of a needle, a stitch that requires needle swing, as you increase the width, in other words, the distance that it's stretching that thread, you are going to have to deal with more tension balance issues, because it's creating basically a cavity gap between each one of those stitch points where it's hitting here, here, and here, and you're stretching that thread across. So if you don't have proper balance, you're not going to have a nicely defined uh, needle swing type stitch, whether it's a zigzag or a decorative ornamental stitch, whatever it is. So just take that into account as you're dealing with making wider or more intimate, intricate, not intimate, as you're getting more intimate with your intricate stitching, if that makes any sense, you are going to battle that tension a little bit more because you're creating even a further gap point between where that needle is hitting to create that stitch pattern. But a lovely, lovely stitch. Let's turn over and look at the lock stitch, see how we did. And again, it's interesting, even as you look at this elk hide, the coloration of the leather, which is more of a beige color on this side, and you turn it over and it's dramatically darker on this side. We have to get even closer to that stitching to get a good glimpse of it. But I'm seeing that my adjustment was spot on. My adjustment was spot on because I'm seeing even greater clarity of this zigzag as we go across. The peaks are more defined, the tautness of the thread going from one stitch region to another as we're creating that pattern going across, it has even greater clarity than on some of the other leathers that we sewed. And this is probably one of the toughest leathers that we can sew. So let me go across and give you a closer look. I looked away for a second. I went way off. Sorry about that. I'm back on track now. Here we go. Waiting for it to zero in here. There we go. All right. I'm holding my breath literally to try to keep that as steady as I can. It's still a little bit of a challenge. I'll come out a little bit. We'll look at the totality of the stitching. Again, we're looking at the lock stitch right now, which is the most difficult stitch to create, especially on leather like this. There we go. Now I have it pointed right. I think it's gorgeous. I think it's gorgeous, gorgeous stitching. And I wish it were a little bit darker on this side of the leather so it would pop even more. But the spacing, the formation, the clarity of the stitch, both for the zigzag that we did on top and then the straight stitch as well, through some super crazy thick elk hide, is really quite spectacular. I was just curious to see how it displays this way. If I don't end up knocking it over. That's almost a little bit clearer, isn't it? That's a little bit more clear, and it's I don't have to hold my breath as much when it's vertical either. Maybe we'll do more of that. Lovely, lovely stitching. Yeah, that works a little bit better when I put it vertical like that. I think we'll have to do that more. The camera seems to like that more for some reason. So there's another thing over in our pile over there. You can just see that from the side, what we just went through. Again, no hand start on Adam's machine. No hand start whatsoever. And we just sewed through the equivalent of a thick belt. So I think Adam will be in really good shape as far as doing his military vintage type jackets, sewing with this Viking from 1954. All right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of direct this a little bit more now. I love to involve all of you. We're going to do the cotton first, which is what Susie wanted to see. And then I've got some other sew-offs we can do depending on how we're doing on time. I don't know what constraints Adam has on time as well. Again, he's about 6 hours later than we are. So it's going on noon. So it's going on almost 6 o'clock where he's at. If he's doing okay on time, we can go through more of these sew-offs or we can begin to wrap it up. So I'm going to get this 100% cotton into place, which is the next sew-off that Susie wanted to see. I'll start us out with a straight stitch. And then we'll go from a straight stitch of different lengths. I'll kind of mess around with the length a little bit, and then we'll go into some zigzagging, different widths, different lengths, and just see what we can generate. Okay? All right, so first of all, a straight stitch. Let me get the camera all the way over. Get our take-up arm all the way up. And again, we've been goofing around with the tension a little bit. We've been goofing around with the tension a little bit to accommodate the thick leather. Now we're going to cotton, and now we're going to be sewing cotton with a leather needle. So we'll have to see how our tension is maintained, switching again from a totally different material and sewing a material that really is not fully compatible with the type of needle that we're using. But who knows? It might just turn out beautiful the first time. So here goes a straight stitch, and then we'll kind of migrate through some other straight stitch options. Excuse me. And then eventually we'll move into some zigzagging as well. All right, blah, 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 blah. Here we go. And also, if you can't hear it, it's a very, very smooth, silky smooth, quiet running machine as well. Very, very silky smooth. Well, I think we've got some really good balance. I have the advantage of being able to kind of see it before you do. I think we have some really good balance. Even though we migrated from leather to cotton, I'll give you like a quick little pre-glimpse, and then we'll go through all the stitch options, the length options, and then we'll migrate. The only thing I'm seeing is I am going to do one thing right away. I'm going to do one thing right away. I'm going to back this off just a little bit to give us a little bit more definition on that top stitch. So I'm going to turn this a little bit counterclockwise. Again, the only challenging thing about this style of upper tension that they put on the Class 20 is that there's no stop range point. In other words, if you can't turn it all the way to the left and stop and then all the way to the right and say, oh, that's my full range of adjustment. With this one, you can go around and around and around. If I go around and around and around too many times, counterclockwise, this whole knob will come off. But I can go the opposite way, around and around and around clockwise like this, and increase that tension, increase it, give us a beautiful lock stitch. But if we go too far, we'll take away from that top stitch again. Again, if you're brand new to sewing, if you join the live stream late, what this does right here is it pulls up. What the bobbin case down here does is it pulls down to define that top stitch. So if we have too much power up here, then we're going to be battling an underdefined top stitch because this won't have enough authority and power to pull down. Hopefully that makes sense. And my first little glimpse of it is it's a pretty decent looking top stitch, but it's underserved. And that's why I backed it off a little bit so we can get a little bit more clear top stitch. As long as we don't go too far. So I'm going to stitch exactly the same thing one more time to see what impact we can bring to show the contrast between a slightly underserved top stitch and a straight stitch, and one that's going to have a little bit more pop, just a little bit more pop. We just don't want to go too far, because then we're gonna be taking away from that lock stitch too much. All right, here we go. Let's see if we made an impact. I didn't make a huge change, just a subtle change. We'll see what happens. Oh yeah. Yeah. Just a subtle change, and already it's starting to come into form very, very nicely. We could go a little bit further. I just want to check that lock stitch first. So we're going to go a little bit further on this. I'm going to back this down. Let me bring it up a little bit higher. There we go. I'm going to back this down. The camera's not too happy. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to back this down just a little bit more to give a little bit more emphasis to that top stitch, because it's still not as poppy as I would like to see it. I'm kind of going a little bit more right about there. Let's sew it one more time. And this is just as valuable as anything else we can do, as you can see how we can make these tension adjustments if we're trying to get better clarity of a stitch on a particular material. We had it bang on the leather, and it's starting to come into very nice form, but it's not quite there yet. Not quite there yet. Let's bring this down, the camera down. Try that stitch line one more time. And then we'll move into some other stitch length options. Again, the same thing is true of a longer straight stitch. You need to calculate that factor of tension in more, because the gap point where that needle is striking to make that stitch longer is further and further apart as you make that stitch longer. So you're creating almost like a bridge. You're creating a longer bridge of thread that's going to require even more tension management to have good clarity on that particular stitch. All right, let's try it again and see what we get this time. We made another little adjustment to try to get this top stitch to pop in a little bit more with greater clarity. We'll see if we're successful in bringing more clarity to it. All right, here we go. Yeah, slow but sure, it's starting to come into form very nicely. But again, I think my adjustments might be a little bit too conservative. I'm going to do one more adjustment. I wasn't going to do this, but we have enough room to work in. I'm going to do one more adjustment and just see if we can bring even more clarity to this top stitch. It's starting to come into form very nicely now that we've gone from leather to cotton, but we still don't quite have it nailed yet. So we're going to try another adjustment. We just don't want to go too far, because then we're going to be battling that lock stitch being underdefined. It'll become like a teeter-totter effect. All right, let's give it a go again. One more stitch line, straight stitch. I've got it set on the maximum length, which is making this a little bit more difficult, because we're stretching that like a bridge. We're stretching that thread further between the strike points of where the needle is going in. But you can see the difference from all the way over here in this column to the middle column, and then finally to this last column. We're starting to come into clarity now as far as that straight stitch, top stitch presentation. Let's see what happens this time. There we go. There we go. I'll just let you kind of look down at it from here. I don't need to put it on display. You can look down from here with the camera. The whole point is we systematically are going through from this very first stitch line over here to this one, and now this one, zeroing in on where that upper tension needs to be adjusted to give us a nicely defined top stitch and also a nicely defined lock stitch. I don't think we've gone as far as we could go, but I'm going to stop there for now, because we can look across and we can see the impact that we slowly have brought to this stitching. I'll kind of move this over a little bit more. You can start to see the impact that we begin to bring to this stitching. Again, we haven't gone as far as we need to, because If you look at the back, our lock stitch, this is our lock stitch now. Our lock stitch sewing this cotton with a stiffener is beautifully poppy, but it's taking all of the authority away, or at least most of the authority away from that top stitch. So if we were going to get this balanced just as we want to get it balanced, we would have to turn that upper tension back even further and then bring this into line and then just continue to monitor that lock stitch. It's a balance back and forth. If we don't go far enough, we've got an overly poppy lock stitch on the bottom and we still don't have the clarity we want here yet. It's coming into form. But if we go too far, we get this all of a sudden popping beautifully and then we lose the clarity on the bottom. It's a teeter-totter effect, isn't it? But all in all, I'm very pleased. I'll show this to you from a different angle. You'll be able to see the stitching even more clearly. And then you'll kind of see the progression that we made. Again, it's not exactly the way we want it, but we know what to do if we needed to make more changes to it. Let me do it like this, actually. All right, and I'm going to do it vertical because that seemed to work a little bit better, didn't it? So as we're looking at this stitching, the one on the far left is where we started. The one on the far right is where I just stopped. We're not home yet. We're not home yet with getting this top stitch exactly the way we want it. But if you look across, you should be able to see the migration of where this is starting to take form and it's starting to tighten up. And this is a normal result when you change between materials and also when you're using a needle that isn't fully compatible with the type of material you're sewing on. You're going to have to make these tension adjustments, and that's okay because it allows us to get that clarity of stitching back into place and get it the way we want to get it. So I think we're almost there, but we're not quite as far as I'd like to be. So now we're going to flip it over and look at that lock stitch, which is just a slam dunk. Because right now that lock stitch has a lot more clarity than the top stitch. So I'll kind of go up and down a little bit and show you that. Even from the very get-go, on the far left here, we had more than an adequate lock stitch. But you'll notice that when we went from here to over here on the far right, all of a sudden, if you look at it with a lot of scrutiny, the length of the stitch over here is clearly stubbier than it is over here because we slowly but surely have taken away some of the pull-up factor of that upper tension, which allows that stitch to become more full. When we have too much tension pulling up, we actually compress that stitch length over here on the left side, if you look at that. As we start to reduce that upper tension, that stitch becomes a little bit more robust. So that again is our lock stitch, and then this is our top stitch again. Again, I'd like to go a little bit further on this top stitch, but I want to be sensitive to the time. What we would do to bring greater clarity to this top stitch, again, it's not horrible, but it's not as good as it can be. What we would do is we would just back off. We would back off this upper tension even further, and it would give more clarity to this top stitch. So for right now, at least, let's move into a different length straight stitch and also into some zigzagging as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to buzz down, making a shorter straight stitch. It's going to move my stitch length controller right over here up to right around, why don't we say just right around 2.5, right around close to 2.5. We'll go ahead and buzz down this and see what we think of this shorter stitch. And even shorter stitches can present a little bit of challenge too, depending on the machine setup. So we'll see how it manages this shorter stitch now. All right, here we go. Yeah, and I've just made another quick little adjustment on that upper tension. Backed it off a little bit more, give it more clarity. I'm going to stitch the same thing, and then we'll look at the two lines comparatively. I wasn't holding onto the thread well enough. Got a little bit of a bird nest thing going right there, which is that thread getting pulled in. There we go. Certain machines and the Japanese clones do the same thing because of their hook design system. Certain machines will pull that thread just a little bit more than others, and you have to manage that by holding onto that thread a little bit when you initially launch. It's just a product of the way the machine is designed. So we're going to lay down the same stitch length again. I'm not really happy with that top stitch having enough clarity, so I'm going to go ahead and buzz down one more time. We'll see if we can get a little bit more clarity, and then we'll move into some zigzagging after that. Oh yeah, there we go. Just that little adjustment. Yeah, that's much better. Hopefully I didn't impact the lock stitch on the back, so that's good. Okay, let's pull this thread. So yeah, as you're changing stitch length, whether it's a straight stitch or a zigzag, just think of it like a bridge. You know, as engineers are designing bridges, they have to take into account weight factors and spans, the distance between the different support points and all that. And stitching different materials is the same way. We have to factor in that stretch factor. Yeah, this is the correct way for our top stitch. We have to take into account that stretch factor when we're looking at the impact that the tension has on that. So these are our top stitches that we've done so far. Again, we went through a migration over here where we definitely didn't have enough definition on the top stitch. We kind of migrated through some different phases. We brought some better results, and now we just had to do the same thing. It only required one change in backing off that upper tension a little bit, and now we have a much shorter stitch. We started out probably about 5 to 6 stitches per inch over here, and now we've gone down to about 10 stitches per inch over here, 8 to 10 stitches, and we were able to reel in that upper tension and get this top stitch presenting a lot better just in one movement. Where when we had that bridge distance much greater with a longer stitch over here, we went through 4 changes and we started to get some results, but we didn't get it quite to the point that I would like to have it at if we were going to be sewing that quite a bit. So let me kind of go up and down and just give you a look at these stitches. Here we're starting to get a nice top stitch on the far right at a much shorter stitch length, starting to come into form very nicely. But again, it's a little bit tricky when you're working with a diverse field of materials. You're dealing with a needle that interacts with the material much differently than one that would be specific to that material type. Kind of like having lemons and making lemonade. But I like doing this because it allows us to go through the thinking process of making adjustments to get the stitching where we want it to be. And even if we don't go to the full extent because of time constraints, it allows us to begin to understand, oh, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to do to have this result happen. And there's others that would look at these stitch lines and say, I think they're all pretty decent stitch lines. Well, that might be the case that, for one person, this would be, for one person, this might be an acceptable standard of stitching. But like I always say, we can always make things better. So what I like to do is I like to take you through the thinking process of saying, okay, if this were passable, if this were an acceptable standard, can we make it better? The answer is obviously yes. And in this instance, it's by backing off that upper tension so that that top stitch can be better defined. The same thing we did with these longer stitches, where those bridges, the support points are a lot further apart on these long stitches. And the same thing with these shorter stitches, where the support points are a lot closer together, and it's easier to manage that tension issue much more quickly because the gap points between the needle strikes are much fewer because they're closer together. So hopefully that makes sense, and you can look at that and go, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. That makes sense. Now I understand better. And then we can look at these lock stitches. I just turned it over to show these lock stitches. And here we can see that upper tension, this unit right here, is working extremely well, actually a little bit too well. It's working a little bit too well, even from the get-go over here. And we've had to tame it back a little bit so that stitch on the other side, the top stitch, can get some of the glory. Right now, the lock stitch is being very selfish. Right now, the lock stitch is being very self-centered. And it's saying, I'm the center of attention. I'm the show. But it needs to make friends with that top stitch on the other side and give some of its beauty to the stitch on the other side, which is what we would do if we were spending a lot of time together and we were making adjustments even further. But you can look at these stitches and go, they're already where they need to be, but they're a little bit further than they really need to be. And that's where we tame back that upper tension and we start to give some glory back to that top stitch again. I'm waiting for the camera to give me glory as far as focusing here. So sometimes it's really easy. Many people will battle. Trying to get a nicely defined lock stitch. That's why in a lot of the eBay sales things and on Etsy and other places, they'll show you the top stitch straight away because that's easier to define. They won't show you the lock stitch. Here we have the opposite. We have a lock stitch that's overly defined right now because we need to adjust this back even further, turning it counterclockwise. But we have a top stitch that could use more glory. Yeah, hopefully that is helpful to you so you understand how you need to get these two to become friends, the bobbin case down here and the upper tension. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna do a zigzag on this now. I almost forgot. I almost started to throw it to the back. I'm gonna do a zigzag on this now. And we're gonna go to the max this time. Because we're not dealing with a leather material, we're dealing with a cotton material right now. So we're gonna go to a zigzag max right now. We're gonna turn this all the way to 4. We're gonna bring this all the way down to 4. And we'll see how we can maintain a decent stitch balance now. Laying down a zigzag, which is going to have that needle swing. Again, we're stretching that bridge. We're stretching that bridge much further now, going all the way to the max. Okay. All right, here we go. Let's see how we do. And again, we're sewing, if you joined us late, we're sewing 100% cotton with a stiffener using a leather needle. Not the ideal setup, but we'll see how we do. All right, here we go. Turn it this way so you can get an initial glimpse of it. And here, I made another quick little adjustment before we just stitched this zigzag. I turned that upper tension back a little bit further. And here we have a lovely, lovely zigzag at its widest point. And when you go to that widest point again, you're making the gaps on those bridges much longer, which means you need to have even better tension balance to maintain the integrity of that stitch. The wider, the longer the stitch is, the more tension integrity you need to maintain the clarity of that stitch. And what I'm seeing right now with this top stitch on this zigzag is a solid page 34 plus. It's a solid page 34 plus, which makes me a little bit anxious about flipping it over and looking at the zigzag lock stitch to see whether or not by turning it back and turning it back, I've taken too much away from that lock stitch. Let's see what happens. Hopefully not. Yeah, I would say all in all, we've got a very, very lovely lock stitch zigzag as well. But you notice that the peaks are just slightly bit softer. They're very, very nice peaks on this zigzag, very, very nice peaks, but they're just a little softer than that top stitch, which tells you that I may have turned this counterclockwise just a hair too far. So if we turned it back to the right just a tiny little bit, we would be able to get even greater clarity to this zigzag lock stitch. It's very, very good. It's a solid page 34, no question about it. But we can always, 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 always make things better. So that's where I compare this lock stitch to this top stitch. And I say the top stitch now is doing its Brooklyn strut. Now the top stitch is doing its Brooklyn strut. It was struggling all the way across here with the straight stitching and being able to strut and say, look at me, look at me. Now all of a sudden we do a zigzag at its widest point. I make a couple more adjustments on that upper tension. And now it's saying, yeah, you got nothing over on me, lock stitch. Now I got the glory. So they got to be friends. Doggone it. Why can't they just be friends? It's like the Republicans and the Democrats, for goodness sakes. Let's work together, guys. Let's work together. Ah! So very, very pleased. Again, whenever you stretch that thread further in laying down a stitch that has needle movement or a straight stitch that's going to have a wider gap because of the length of it, you're always going to be challenging that tension factor. And I think we've had great success here. A little bit more fine tuning if we want to go for near perfect, but the top stitch for the zigzag looks spot on. The zigzag lock stitch also is spot on as well. So, all right. So now let's do a smaller zigzag just for fun, and then we'll wrap up the cotton thing. And again, thank you for your patience as I try to take you through these processes. Our classroom is about learning. So if you can get to a point where it becomes second nature, as you're looking at a stitch and you're going, this looks a little bit weaker, this doesn't have as much pop, I know what to do. You are ahead of a lot of long-term seamstresses. I've had seamstresses contact me in the workshop. I've had tailors contact me in the workshop. They've been sewing all their lives professionally, but they've never been explained. They've never understood. They've never fully grasped how to balance that stitch factor and what you need to do to impact it. Some of them have done exactly the opposite. So when we can share that knowledge, it makes the sewing process so much easier and so less frustrating. Because if you look anywhere on any platform, the most common point of frustration is going to be tension. Inevitably, it's going to be tension, getting a solid tension balance, especially if they're being as crazy as I am on live streams and not just sewing a static type of material. You know, all we're going to do in this live stream is sew cotton. That's not the way we roll. We go from cotton to leather to denim to elk hide to compressed felt to naga hide to bubblegum material. And we do it with a great deal of dignity and pride, but sometimes we have to bumble along and say, this is what we need to do to make it better. Yeah. So now we're going down to 2.5. Let's see what impact we can bring now on this next zigzag. And then we're going to throw this to the back in that pile as well. All right, here we go. And hopefully I don't run out of bobbin thread. I didn't even think about that. I've been having too much fun over here. So I'm going to do the same thing because I think it works pretty well. This is the more compressed zigzag that we just did. Again, this one was at max 4 and 4, and then we bumped this one down to 2.5 by 2.5. Beautiful, beautiful top stitch on this zigzag, this more compressed one. Beautiful. Now we're going to turn it over. Let's see how we did on the lock stitch. Yeah, equally lovely lock stitch as well on this zigzag too. Equally lovely zigzag. Yeah, so we have a good balance right now for this cotton. If we were sewing cotton all day long, I think we've nailed it now. Because most of the time when you're sewing cotton, you're going to have other layers involved. You might have batting, like our quilters use regularly. You're going to have other layers involved. Right now, we've got a beautiful balance using a leather needle, nonetheless, sewing this cotton material with a stiffener in it. So I think we can confidently throw this to the rear now. We've got a beautiful stitch there. We've got an equally beautiful stitch there, both on the wider zigzag and on the more compressed zigzag. And let's sew a couple of other materials and then we'll wrap this up. Because again, it's going on a little bit after 6 o'clock in London right now. And it's going on after 1 o'clock on the East Coast. So this is going to our little pile in the back as well now. I shouldn't say little pile. That's kind of a gross misunderstatement. I'm going to kind of pull this through the harp area. This is what we've done so far on this Schmetz leather needle, size 9014, folks. A lot of this was done on this live stream today, including this Alkyd that Adam said in particular. This Alkyd is of particular interest to him, along with the saddle grade leather, the 6 layers of denim, protected full grain leather. I'm trying to remember, help me out, you guys. I did this protected full grain leather off camera, this blue stuff. I did this off camera. I didn't do this during the live stream today, correct? I think we still have to do protected full grain leather. And again, since Adam is going to be working a lot with restoring military vintage jackets, he might encounter protected full grain leather as well. He might encounter this stuff. So it might be beneficial to do that for Adam as well. But look at all that we've already done on camera and off to make sure that this machine should be entitled to graduate from the workshop. You know, if any of my skeptics, if any of my critics out there can look at something like this and say, this guy in Wisconsin, holy cow, he takes putting those machines to a test to a new level. I think that they could say that and really swallow their pride a little bit and say it, because I don't know of anyone else that takes a machine through this level of testing before I say, okay, you graduate. You can go back to your customer now. You can go back to my customer now. You can go back to your owner. You guys know what I meant. So I'm going to throw this pile back here and say, I think we've already done our job, but we're going to go a little bit further. And I hope that's okay. So the first thing we can sew is I've got one layer of this tricky compressed felt, this stuff that's heat treated to get it to a new level of crazy. This stuff is surprisingly difficult to get through, surprisingly difficult. Kind of like that acrylic fiber that I present to you occasionally. So let's be totally insane here. Let's lay down the widest zigzag on this compressed felt. I'm going to turn this all the way up to 4. I'm going to bring this all the way down to 4. So I just took this to 4, this to 4. Again, our stitch width, our stitch length to the maximum on this tricky compressed felt. Let's see how we do. I probably shouldn't have done that, but what the heck? Let's be wild. All right. So here goes a zigzag to the max on this very tricky compressed felt, heat treated. All right, here we go. Blah, 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 blah. Oop, I think we're going to run into a tension issue. I can already hear it. I think we're going to have a major tension issue with our, oh yeah, we are. Oh, and I also sewed over my own thread. That's not good either. Let me try that again. Here's what I got. See, I wasn't being diligent in holding onto that thread. So this type of machine, again, the Japanese clone machines do the same thing. It kind of sucks that thread in. Let's see if I can pull that back out again. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to say I goofed up. I didn't hold that thread steady enough. And the result is, maybe I can save it. Hold on. Oh, I'm just going to get aggressive here. Just going to get aggressive. Ah. Hey, I saved it. A miracle. Yay. So at any rate, beautiful lock stitch. That's our lock stitch after I just battled that thread debacle at the beginning. Beautiful lock stitch. The stitch integrity, the spacing is spot on. Lovely, lovely, lovely zigzag on this tricky compressed felt. And we've got an equally lovely top stitch. A little bit of a looseness over here as we launched into it, but that's probably because I wasn't holding that thread properly. Matter of fact, if I give that a little bit of a pull, it might tighten up straight away. Yep, it did a little bit. But this is our top stitch. Beautiful zigzag. Our lock stitch right there. Beautiful zigzag. Through a very tricky material, this compressed felt stuff. All right. And I do send, I think all of you know this by now, I do send all of these sew-offs with the machine back to England. So it's going to go back to England. So Adam, having been a part of this live stream, can actually hold these pieces that I sewed on camera. And if there's room, I'll leave room over here. He can actually sew them himself again, just to revisit how to hold the thread better than I did, so he doesn't get that little debacle at the beginning. Let's see. Let me take this zigzag down to a 2x2. Kind of like the arc. Animals 2x2. Here we're going to go stitching 2x2 as far as stitch length and stitch width. So let me try to do a better job this time of holding that thread as we launch. See if I can avoid that debacle at the beginning, hopefully. All right, here we go. Hope I did it. Yeah, I did a better job that time. Let me kind of back the camera up a little bit and kind of show you. That's our zigzag on the back. May have just had a little bit of anomaly along there. But again, we're dealing with a needle that's becoming very tired and a needle that's designed for leather, and we're sewing felt with it now. We've gone from leather to felt to denim to everything else. But all in all, a very, very nice compressed zigzag. That's our lock stitch again, and this is our top stitch. Yeah. Let me move that a little bit further. There we go. So it's fun to push machines a little bit further, isn't it? It's fun to push machines. Number one, we don't have the ideal setup for all the materials we're sewing, but at the same time, we can have a little bit of fun learning how to adjust the machine as we're sewing to deal with some of the anomalies that we inevitably will encounter, changing through materials as drastically as I am. Again, you can't get much further apart than felt and leather. But we're doing it with the same needle, the same setup. So let me throw that to the back. And now I think we're going to move into, let's do some of this bubblegum material. That's totally different than anything else we've sewn. And I don't know what kind of outcome. I didn't test this off camera. I don't know how it's going to respond to this leather needle, but we'll give it a go. So I'm going to fold it in half. We'll give us 2 layers of this. And again, if you join the live stream a little bit late, I know we've had people coming and going. But I call it bubblegum material because of the nylon factor in it. Excuse me, the vinyl factor in it, the vinyl factor. There I'm stretching it dramatically. So we'll see how Adam's machine does in managing this. It's really going to come down to tension and how it manages the tension with this. And I think because of the size of this piece, Matter of fact, I should probably cut this down a little bit. It's way, way too big. We'll cut this down just a little bit and go with a smaller piece so I don't have to put those clips on it, hopefully. All right, so now we'll go back to this one piece instead of two. We'll fold it over. I still might go with clips on it anyway, but it'll be a little bit more manageable this way, hopefully. Where are my clips? We'll put a clip right here. Right about there. And put a clip right about down here. See if that helps us a little bit to stay more even. So let's start with a straight stitch. Go to 0. And we'll go to our max on 4. And we'll see how Adam's machine deals with this bubblegum material. Again, a lot of vinyl in this stuff. That's why it stretches so much. We're going to try to lay down a straight stitch, and then we'll try to lay down a zigzag next to it. No promises, because I did not test this off camera, but I'm hoping that Adam's machine can continue to perform as brilliantly as it has in adapting from one material to another with only some very subtle adjustments. So let me get my hand back there. I'll give a quick hold onto this thread, and we'll see how this machine, this Swedish beauty, does at this point. Here we go. Get one more little stitch in there. Press your foot up, spring it around. Yeah, I'm seeing a lovely top stitch. I'll show you that to you right away with no delay. Just pull the thread out a little bit more. Lovely, lovely top stitch. Spacing the formation, the integrity of the stitch. There we go. Now I've got it all the way in the shot. Beautiful top stitch. Lovely, lovely top stitch on a very tricky material. This bubblegum material is really it can derail practically any machine with skip stitches and with deformity of stitch. And we've got a beautiful top stitch. Lovely top stitch. But as I look at the back of it, I'm going to flip it over in just a second. As I look at the back of it, I'll show this to you a little bit more clearly. Look at the back of it. We have a little bit of an underserved lock stitch, just slightly underserved. And that's a product of that upper tension having been turned back several times. All in all, it's lovely. It's a lovely lock stitch, but we could make it even better with just a subtle bump up on the upper tension unit. And I say that because when I'm looking at it with a lot of scrutiny, the spacing, the formation, the clarity of the stitch is really lovely, but it could be even better, a little bit tighter, a little bit better defined. See if I can move it this way as well to show you. Just a couple little loose spots on it, which tells me that the upper tension is a little bit underserved right now. Look at the top stitch again. Bang on, exactly as it should be. So again, understanding what to do is the key, isn't it? So now we're going to try to do a zigzag with this same tricky material, and we'll see if we have any drastic tension variables that come up as soon as we throw needle swing into the equation. Because needle swing can right away make it a little bit more difficult for the machine to maintain stitch balance and stitch tension. Oops. All right, let me get that back into position. I'm really in a tight space here. Let me see if I can do this. Get that thread like there. There we go. Okay. And what I'm going to do, since we did max on, yeah, that is a lovely stitch, isn't it? Beautiful, beautiful stitching. We're going to go max on the zigzag as well. So we're going to take this stitch width from all the way on 0 all the way to 4. This is already on 4, our stitch length. So we have 4 and 4, which means we're making the span on that bridge even further. The more we stretch that thread by making the stitch wider or longer, the more challenges we can run into as far as maintaining the tension balance between the two. So we're going to give it a go, see how we can pull this off, especially on a material as tricky as this. This is really tricky stuff. And if anyone wants a free sample, I might just ask you to cover the postage. I'll be glad to send you some of this stuff so you can give it a try on your machine. All right, here we go. A max zigzag on this bubblegum material. Let's see how we do. Here we go. So there is, let me get this pulled out a little bit. There is our top stitch. It's kind of want to see how it's trying to curl, and that's because of that vinyl in there. It's trying to curl on me as I'm trying to show it to you. But this is our zigzag top stitch. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's adjust the camera a little bit, shall we? Let's adjust the camera a little bit. Beautiful, beautiful zigzag, in my opinion. Lovely, lovely zigzag. I think I have almost the entire thing in the shot now. So that's our top stitch. Folks, it doesn't get any better than that. Both the top stitch and, both the straight stitch and the zigzag on this top stitch are exactly what we want to be seeing. The spacing, the formation, the integrity of the stitch, the presentation of the stitch, the glory of the stitch is bang on, as my good friends over in the UK would say. It's bang on. Let's turn it over and look at the lock stitch now. We're not going to see any difference because we've got a very good balance now between the two. They're being good friends. They're being good friends now. And they're saying, okay, let's get along. Let's get along. Scott's on camera. He's really trying to do his best to show this. Let's not give him a hard time. So here we're looking at this bubblegum material. We're looking at the lock stitch now. We're looking at the zigzag we just laid down. And you know what, folks? I'm very, very proud of that. It's a lovely, lovely zigzag, as is the straight stitch adjacent to it that we laid down first. So all in all, in spite of having a less than ideal setup, we got a tiring leather needle sewing vinyl. We've got a tiring leather needle sewing cotton, sewing leather, sewing compressed felt. And yet this machine, being at its point of greatness, is continuing to nail it each and every time. It's just doing a spectacular job, isn't it? So I'll go ahead and cut this. We'll throw this to the rear. And I want to get some feedback from the owner as far as if I've covered it. We'll wrap it up. If they want to see a couple more sew-offs, then I'll be glad to go a little bit further. Because again, live streams and premieres are for the owner's benefit primarily, for everybody's benefit for sure. But in particular, the owner that's made an investment in sending the machine to the workshop, especially when you're talking about sending the machine all the way from London, England to Oconto, Wisconsin. I really want to make this about the owner, just as if you were one sending the machine to the workshop. I'd want to make it about you as well. I'd want to make it about you. Beautiful stitching. Off to the pile you go. Off to the pile. Ah, there we go. Look at that pile. That's just insane. It's insane. But again, it gives the owner the opportunity to get excited about what this machine is doing on a live stream long before it ever arrives in London. So what I have left is I've got some of this protected full grain leather. Got a bunch of that. I've got this nasty, awful Naugahyde stuff that has this vinyl in it. It's a nightmare to sew this stuff. It truly is. And what I'd like to do is I'll let you pick the rank order, but I'd like to do 2 layers of Naugahyde, and I'd like to do 2 layers of this protected full grain leather as a wrap up to this live stream. I'm going to throw these extras off to the side. I have no idea why I cut so many. I was apparently very excited about protected full grain leather at that time. So here we've got the protected full grain leather. We've got 2 layers of that. And then we've got 2 layers of this Naugahyde. No, I don't. I've got 3 layers. Throw one of those to the side. So do you want to see the Naugahyde first or the protected full grain leather? These will be our very last 2 sew-offs. And then I need to get these new rubber feet put on Adam's machine so it's all set to have a stable sewing base. So what do you guys think? Naugahyde or protected full grain leather? Oh, welcome to Susie. I've seen the other Susie. We've got a couple Susies, but the Susie that is in the live chat right now. Oh, Adam had to sign off. Okay. So, and that's understandable. It's getting late for him. It's getting late for him. And he had specifically said that we couldn't go past 6 p.m. I thought he meant 6 p.m. US time, but he must have meant 6 p.m. in England. And so it's going almost on 6:30 now in England. So that's my fault. So now it's not up to the owner. Now it's up to us if we do Naugahyde or if we do protected full grain leather first. And then we'll wrap this live stream up. And I think we've met Susie before, haven't we? Susie, love the beautiful machine. Yeah. Yeah, it really is a lovely machine, isn't it? Yeah. Got a couple little love taps right here. But all in all, the patina on this 1954 Swedish Beauty, this class 20, is really quite exceptional. It's received a lot of tender loving care. A lot of tender loving care. Yeah. And since Susie, not Susie from Minnesota, but the other Susie joined us a little bit late, check out this really cool light bulb. Again, we're operating this machine at 250 volts today in the US using a step-up converter. And this cool light, which I think is just really, maybe I get too excited about light bulbs. Maybe that's it. But I think it's a spectacular light. Yeah, you could put a normal bulb in there. You'd blow this sucker out because that 250 volts would hit that bulb that's designed for 110 to 125, and it would just go boop, dead bulb. Ha ha! We tried it with an LED, it might have actually melted. Who knows what it would do? That would be pretty interesting. Yeah. All right, let me look at the chat real quick. Either one is okay. Adam had to leave. Yep. Okay, let's finish off these last two saw-offs. You've been very patient. We're almost at the mark of 3 hours. It goes so quickly when we're together, doesn't it? So let's see if we can do this one real quick. We'll do a straight stitch first down this protected full grain leather, and then we'll do a zigzag next to it. And then we'll go wrap this up. Okay, so 2 layers of protected full grain leather. This is some thick stuff, folks. Look at it from the side. Probably almost close to 8 to 10 ounces of leather. So we'll see how we manage this one. And again, we've changed the upper tension several times, so we might have to tweak it again. We'll have to wait and see. There we go. I think I got that. And I'm going to use my little clips to try to help this material stay grouped together a little bit better, hopefully. Okay, get this tidied up there. All right, let's give this a go and see how this, and we might hit that, again, this needle is getting a little bit dull. It's a leather needle, but it's getting a little bit dull after all the sewing that we've done on it. I mean, just look at that pile back there. You get an idea of how much we've already pushed this needle. So we'll see how it does in these final sew-offs with the Naugahyde and then also this protected full grain leather. All right, now I'm going to try to do this without a hand start, but it may hit that leather and just go, are you insane? Are you insane? So we'll see how we do. Here we go. And it did. It hit that leather like, no. A little bit of a hand start. Take that clip off, take this clip off. Yeah, we actually maintained stitch balance very nicely through these 2 layers of protected full grain leather. I'll give you a quick glimpse of them. I'm going to pull that back and you can look at these. That is some solid page 34 stitching. It truly is. Very lovely stitching. That again is our top stitch. Beautiful stitching all the way across. Let me carefully see if I can draw this out. And then we'll flip it over. This is our top stitch again right here. We'll flip it over and look at that lock stitch. Yeah, and all in all, a good lock stitch, but a little bit underserved. Just a tiny little bit underserved, which means we would have to increase our upper tension just slightly to give that more poppiness. All in all, it's not bad. It's not a bad stitch, but we can make it better by giving it a little bit more poppiness by adjusting that upper tension. So I think what I'll do to wrap up this this protected full grain leather is I'll make a quick adjustment up here. I'm going to turn that just a little bit clockwise. And we're going to sew it one more time, and then I'll throw this to the back. Yeah, that's our top stitch right there, because that's a lot more poppy than our lock stitch is. So let's see what impact we can bring to this lock stitch on the bottom that's a little bit underserved right now. Get our take-up arm all the way up. Bring our camera back in a little bit closer again so you can watch the action. And we will try this one more time. I'm hoping that the adjustment that I made, again, not a drastic adjustment, but the adjustment that I made will give us just a little bit more poppiness on the backside of this material for that lock stitch. Because while it's okay, it's not as good as it could be. Here we go. Well, I'm pleased. I'm very pleased that at least what I'm seeing on top, if you look at these rows side by side, we did not adversely impact. This is our second stitch line right here on the left-hand side. We did not adversely impact our stitch clarity as far as that top stitch. Both rows look really, really nice. Very, very nice stitching. Now the question is, did we bring an impact to that lock stitch on the back side? Let me move the camera back a little bit. We'll kind of flip this over. And the answer is yes, we absolutely did. I love bringing an impact, don't you? I love bringing an impact. Here where you can see on the left side was our first stitch row. Our first stitch row was this one on the left. And then I just bumped up the upper tension just slightly. I mean, after all, we are sewing 2 layers of protected full grain leather, about 8 ounces of leather. Look at it from the side. It's crazy. So all we did is make a slight bump up on the upper tension, and all of a sudden that stitch, that lock stitch on the back, is coming into beautiful form. Coming into beautiful form. It's starting to really shout out and say, okay, look at me. Look at me. And that's what we love our stitches to do, don't we? We love our stitches to cry out and say, look at me, look at me. Nice stitching. Really, really nice stitching. I'll be more specific, say page 34 plus. So I'm going to throw this protected full grain leather to the back and we're going to do our final sew off, which is this Naga hide. Naga hide makes me nervous. I'm just being honest with you. Naga hide is very, very high in vinyl content. It's nasty stuff. It's worse than bubblegum material. That's just crazy. Let me show this to you real quick, you guys and gals. I'm trying to get a grip on it. It's so thick, I can barely get a grip on it. Jiminy crickets. This is crazy. Gee, if I lost some of it. It's so much. If I can bring it through the harp space here. This is what I've sewn so far on this needle that we're using right now, this size 9014 Schmetz leather needle. All of this. A lot of this was done on this live stream today. Some of it was done off camera. But that is beyond insane. But again, because of the distance, we're looking at a machine that was thoughtfully shipped all the way from London, England to Oconto, Wisconsin, 4,000 miles. I'm putting this through even more of a sewing Olympics to make sure that everything is absolutely as it should be before I ship it all the way back to Adam. That's the way everyone should do graduation parties for their sewing machines if they're presenting them on YouTube, in my opinion. Everyone should do it that way because it really, really puts that machine to the test. Okay, Naugahyde, this ugly, nasty Naugahyde stuff that has origins going way, way back. We're going to try to do 2 layers of it, 2 layers of this stuff, and I'm going to keep my fingers and toes crossed. Keeping my fingers and toes crossed. And we're going to make it even more difficult by starting out with a zigzag. Matter of fact, I might, since I did only straight stitching on the other one, I might only do zigzagging on this stuff. Okay, so there's our Naugahyde. I'm going to clip it together. Clip it together and try to keep it as straight as I possibly can. Okay, here we go. I'll set this up for zigzag. We're going to go probably, let's do a 3x3. We haven't done a 3x3 yet. So I'm setting the stitch length at 3. I'm setting the stitch width at 3. And we're going to lay down a zigzag on these 2 layers of Naugahyde first. Naugahyde, again, has a huge amount of vinyl in it. So it's real tricky stuff to sew. Let's see how the machine does. Our final sew off. Here we go. I'm surprised I haven't run out of bobbin thread yet. It's pretty amazing. Would have thought that I run out by now, but not yet, apparently. Oh, wow. Wow, what a great way to wrap up. We might do one more, a little bit more condensed, because this is a 3x3, which means we're almost at the max. So again, thinking of it like a bridge, the width and the length, we're taking it to a point of really, really stretching this machine's capabilities. The longer the gap, the longer the width, the longer the length, the more you have to manage that tension issue. And Adam's machine just did a spectacular job. Spectacular job. Let me see if I can get my hand out of the way. Folks, it doesn't get much better than that. That is absolutely a lovely zigzag on the part of this Swedish Beauty from 1954. Let me pull the thread out a little bit, turn it over, and we'll take a look at that, that lock stitch on the back. Folks, that also is absolutely spot on. Beautiful, beautiful lock stitching. Again, I look at the peak factor. I look at the spacing, the formation of the stitching. The lock stitch on this Naugahyde material, again, very, very tricky stuff to sew, is about as good as it can get. It's page 34 plus. Really, really lovely, lovely stitching. Move the camera a little bit more. There we go. Now you can see the whole kind of go back and forth. So you know what? I could go further, but I'm going to leave the rest of this space open for Adam to sew. And we're going to wrap up this live stream now. I know it's run a lot longer than I expected, but again, I wanted to really, really run this 1954 Swedish Beauty through the paces, recognizing that it's going to be traveling 4,000 miles back. By the time it completes its journey and it arrives at Adam's flat, this Swedish Beauty will have traveled 8,000 miles. 8,000 miles. Now, if any of you are mathematicians, that's 1/3 of the way around the world. 1/3 of the way around the world. Going around the world is about 25,000 miles. It will have traveled almost 1/3 of the way around the world in distance. So I want to make sure everything is absolutely as it should be so that this machine doesn't have to come back to the workshop again. You know what I mean? Wouldn't that be horrible? So this Naugahyde is a great way to wrap up. It's very tricky stuff. Very, very tricky stuff for any sewing machine to sew. And this 1954 Swedish Beauty knocked it out of the ballpark. Did a beautiful, beautiful job in laying down top shelf stitching. on such a tricky material. Such a tricky material. So let's do this now. Please humor me just for a few more seconds. You've been incredibly patient as we've been sewing with this 1954 machine. And again, if you join the live stream late, we're sewing with a machine using 250 volts. We're using 250 volts instead of the standard 110, 125, because this machine is wired for the European marketplace. And if you can see in the distance shot there, that's the case that I also had to restore for Adam as well. All of these edge pieces were completely off. The inside lining was completely off. It required a lot of TLC, a lot of TLC. So on camera and off camera, most of these were done during the live stream today. We just got done sewing this Naugahyde, 2 layers of that. We sewed this protected full grain leather, 2 layers of that. Saddle grade leather, more protected full grain leather, bubblegum material, more protected full grain leather, compressed felt, cotton to the max, 100% cotton with a stiffener, genuine elk hide, 6 layers of heavy grade denim. We did that on this live stream today. We also did this saddle grade leather using the slow gear today. We did 2 layers of saddle grade leather. We did these 2 layers of Naugahyde. See what I'm saying by the vinyl factor in that? Look at that stuff. It's like doing a curly Q dance. You can just see that vinyl kind of saying, hey, look at me. We did more protected full grain leather. Some of these are off camera that I did in getting ready for the live stream. More Naugahyde, more saddle grade leather, more compressed felt, more cotton, more cotton. I'm going to put these bigger ones on the bottom to finally give you a view of what we sewed on this needle on camera and off. A lot of it on camera today. That is what, if you've never seen one, that's what a sew-off sandwich looks like right there. And I declare now with authority and confidence that this Class 20 1954 Swedish Beauty, wired for the European market, running at 250 volts, is officially graduated from the workshop. And the next step is now to pack it up very carefully after I put a fresh needle in it, because this needle has gotten a workout and a half, and also check to see that the bobbin is full. And then I'm going to be shipping this 4,000 miles back to London, England. How cool is that? How cool is it that we have that reach through this workshop to be able to bring our workshop magic to friends in England, in Japan, in Australia, in Switzerland, all over the world. Very, very cool. So God bless you guys. Thank you so much. Hope you have a beautiful Christmas. And just so I'm not remiss, I plan on doing another live stream. Look all the way across the workshop at that 301A sitting on the other workbench. That's going to be our live stream tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, about the same time, 9:30 Central Standard Time, I plan on trying to live stream premiere that 301A for a customer out of Minnesota. Okay? Take care, everybody. God bless. Thank you to the moderating team for making everyone feel welcome. Also, earlier in the live stream, for managing that knucklehead that was trying to push their links of pornography in the live chat. I have the live chat replay, so if anyone's saying, what? After this is published and processed by YouTube, you should be able to go back and look at the live chat. You'll see that person trying to push their porn again and again and again and again. And the ladies that are serving as moderators did a brilliant job of slamming that person back into place, deleting or blocking them from being able to do that. And they finally, thank goodness, they finally went away. And I realize that that's probably a bot doing that, but I always point at someone because someone programmed that bot to do what they did. You know what I mean? So thank you again to Adam. I know Adam had to leave around 6 o'clock his time, which was about 45 minutes ago. Thank you so much for sending this Swedish Beauty all the way from London, England to Oconto, Wisconsin. What a great live stream to see this incredible machine do its dance and go through that huge pile of sew offs. So take care, everybody. I'm going to put on Christmas music for me, even if you can't hear it. And I'll turn this machine a little bit so you can catch a glimpse of it as we wrap up here. Once I move my water out of the way and all the other things. Move my car as well, extra sew offs. There we go. Almost got it to the side. Now you can catch a little bit of a glimpse of Adam's 1954 Swedish Beauty as I put on a little bit of Christmas music. You may not be able to hear it, but I can hear it. And it's my special reward for all of the energy that I expended into doing this live stream. It's kind of my little perk. All right, let's see if we can get her going here. It's kind of calm. Let's put on something peppier. Here we go. Let's do Joy to the World. That's a great Christmas song. Again, if you can't hear it, that's okay. I can hear it. Wow. Wow. Put it here. Well, thank you again to everyone. I know that we had folks coming and going, and even the owner of the machine, who was here for the most of the live stream, had to eventually step away because it was already past 6 p.m. in London, England. But I'm grateful to all of you for your encouragement, for your attendance, for those of you that stepped out and joined the live stream. It's so great to meet new folks and to welcome you to the Cow Country family and to share things and just make new acquaintances and friendships. A number of them have been forged through this platform, which is wonderful news. So if you can make the live stream tomorrow for the 301A, that would be awesome. It'll be at the same time. God bless everybody. And thank you again to the moderators for making everyone feel welcome and for managing a lot of other factors as well. Take care. Bye now.